what I was gonna ask you. In effect, we gotta wait until he gets back.
Well, we could, or it would, if you both in one favor, then we're gonna keep it anyway.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Tulare County Assessment Appeals Board July 21st, 2014 meeting. Sitting on our panel today are myself, George Azunian, Lance Morris, and William McKinley is absent, and Glenn Fowler will be taking his place. Members of the board, any questions, comments? Staff? And Mr. Assessor? Okay. Then we'll move on to agenda item number 2, which is the annual assessment of the tax roll. Mr. Hill, assessor. Mr. Hill, welcome.
Good morning.
We have one time out of the year to...
You are very fortunate. You only have to put up with me once a year.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, good morning. And how can a year go by so quickly? That's the scary thing. It seems like it wasn't that long ago. I was here with our, what I call the 1604 meeting. It's our mandatory meeting in July every year. And so I'll be going over some information, handing some information out, giving you some information. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those if I can. If not, I'll probably have staff answer it because they're the ones who know everything. So I'm going to first pass out our preliminary roll report for the 2014-15 year. This is the annual mandatory report.
Right. Looks like it. Thank you.
So we know that the real estate market here in the county has improved over the last year. Our tax roll over the year went up 5.1%. So that was the increase over the 13-14 year. On the report, the one thing I think we're going to try to work on when we get a new property system is creating a report that is actually legible. This thing is just a jumble of columns and numbers, but the page 1, it's actually your third page in. Bless you. Has down in the bottom, toward the bottom right corner, we are, for the 14-15 tax year, we're a little over 28, well, almost $29 billion tax roll now, 28.8. That's on a net figure after all the exemptions are removed. The actual assessed roll is a little over $29 billion. The page that has the percentage increases is page 3 of this report. And you'll see down on the bottom right, the countywide total, 5.111%. And then when your eyes get adjusted to this form, you can see that it gives each different community increase. And so we have Dinuba at 4.7% increase over last year, Exeter 4.2, Lindsay 3.2, and so on. The highest percentage increase happened in the city of Woodlake, but it's a very small sampling at almost 8.3%. The significant one would be the Tulare, quite a bit of increase in Tulare, 7.2% on the assessed roll in Tulare, and there's quite a few samples in that. So that would be the largest increase in the county over the year. So, from the county standpoint, from the CAO standpoint, 5.1% was good. It was a little more than we had expected. And so budget-wise, it's helpful for the county to have a higher assessed roll. That always generates some potential activity for this board. Anytime we increase assessments, it's very likely that we'll have an increase in assessment appeals. And so be aware that certainly could be coming for this filing year 14-15. So that kind of gets us to the Prop 8 discussion. We have, of course, had a very active Prop 8, which is our value review program. We've had that ongoing since 2008. What I'm handing out now is just a recap of our 2014-15 Prop 8 program. And we'll briefly go over some numbers with this. Because it's this kind of activity that very likely might generate some business for this body. This particular form, you can see that it starts over there in the left column, 0809. That was the first year of our automated Prop 8 program. But getting over to the very right column, the preliminary results for the 2014-15 roll year, you can see that we reviewed over 70,000 properties in this program. This is an automated computer-assisted mass appraisal program, works on statistical analysis from data that's been inputted by staff over the year with the sales data that we get. You can see the number of properties receiving the reduction, a little over 33,000, which is considerably less than last year. And so that's a significant portion of the increase we have in the assessed roll now is because of the increasing property values and significantly with the Prop 8 program. So you can see the average change in value reduced slightly, but of significant note is the number of properties that have reverted to their base year value, and that's going from 2,600 roughly from last year to over 13,000. So that in itself is going to be a key indicator as to there's going to be a lot of people that when they have gotten their blue cards or when they get their tax bills, they're going to see that their assessment is higher than last year, and so that always generates some interest on the part of our taxpayers. Overall market, I've got a note to maybe briefly talk about some overall market observations. We know that we have a healthier real estate market in the county, statewide as well. I see some other counties posting some rather significant roll increases. I think Custer County posted an over 11% increase over last year. So some areas are coming back very strong. We know that the coastal areas are now at values probably that exceed the values that were in 06, 07. So we are fortunately not attaining those numbers because I don't think we really want to get to a point where we were back in 07 and 08. There were some interesting statistics that came out of our program regarding the actual community, county overall, but then the actual community and the year-to-year percentage change in different size and price stratas of real estate. There are some areas that have really seen some dramatic increases. Some areas are very flat to hardly any change. But when we get into the city of Tulare, what we call our pretty standard tract home, what we have classified as a D5 quality and class, in that 1,400 square foot range, I mean, we saw over a 60% increase in values in that price strata. So, certain areas are doing much, certain areas of property are doing much better. Countywide, the property that in greater than 3,400 square feet, we're finally seeing sales and indications that there's some increase in those values. And properties of the D5 and a half in, say, the 1,800 square feet, which would be a slightly higher quality, larger size tract home, over a 33% change in values over the previous year. So all in all, stronger market, more activity. We understand from from the real estate market, inventories are still very low, which is a problem from the standpoint that we don't have a lot of inventory out there. We don't. It certainly reduces the number of sales and the amount of activity, but certainly stronger market. We know we have a strong ag market at this point in time. We've seen some extremely high ag sales. Our ag preserve values did increase for a variety of some reasons, but primarily extremely strong market at this time. The dairy industry is proving to be very strong again, coming back. So good news from that standpoint, but how long will that last? We know we have some very serious drought implications, and if we don't have an improvement in our water situation, we could have some very dramatic, very drastic effects on our property values. And so that's of key concern for us going forward. There's another report I don't think I've ever handed out before, and so but I wanted to hand it out to you because it has, from a situation of trivia and factoids, it's an interesting report. This is an annual report that we provide mandatorily to the State Board of Equalization each year. It's called our 801 report. If you have trouble sleeping some night, open it up, peruse through it. Within a few minutes, you'll be nodding off. No, but it has the information that we provide here is the information that is just a snapshot of the assessed roll for that particular year. This is the 14-15 year. And you can see all the particular assessed values that we provide to the state, and this is how the state, when you think of how the state might put together numbers on a rather quick basis as to the total assessed values of California. They of course get it from the counties. We have basically a July 1 deadline to provide this to the state each year. The last page has some, kind of some interesting totals, especially when you get into the the ag consideration. When you look at, we have over 1 million acres in Tulare County under the ag preserve contract, over 1 million acres. And in case you wanted to know how many mobile homes we had that were defined under 5801, we have over 3,200 of those mobile homes out there. But anyway, just for your FYI and for your enjoyment, as I say, when you're bored and don't have anything to do. That's pretty much all I have. I just want to point out that we continue to focus on what we might call in the private industry customer service. We hold our taxpayers in a high regard from the standpoint of our office staff, which we have some excellent staff. Just absolutely. The staff of the assessor's office, assessor clerk recorder's office, has never been as good as it is now, and it's really remarkable with the quality of people that we have. And so, but our focus is to make sure that our customers, our property owners, are treated respectfully and fairly, and I hope that shows when they, when it gets to this point, because we try to handle the situation however we can before we get to a point where it may come to this board. So that's pretty much all I have this morning. Hopefully you may have a question or two, but if I can answer those, I'd be happy to.
Any questions from the board
I have a
members?
question. I was kind of surprised, or it was pretty interesting to see on on the Prop 8 report, there were still 33,000 properties receiving a reduction.
Yes.
That's
Isn't that,
yeah,
the numbers,
that's amazing.
the numbers get staggering, don't they? Yes.
Because they've already been, in theory, been reduced over the last couple of years already. So they're still receiving.
But
there's properties
they're
that were
still
missed.
receiving some form of the Prop 8 adjustment now. I'm not sure if I know the percentage. Tim may know of that 33,000. How many of those were, an increase from the previous year? But I would imagine that nearly all of those have had an increase over the previous year, but they're still under the Prop 8 review.
Oh, I got you. So they might have been stepped up in value, but
Exactly.
yeah, okay.
Yes.
They're
Yes.
still
They're,
lower
they're
than the base of the
incrementally
year.
they're more than
Gotcha.
they were last year, but they're still under the Prop 8, and they haven't reverted to their Prop 13 value.
Right.
Correct.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I had a question. You alluded to because I'd been told a number of years ago that any residences within the incorporated cities have an automated system to determine values based upon comps in the area. And anybody in the rural areas or ag land or any other categories, I assume, are being done by hand on a.
We have many that are done by hand. I don't know how many. Would you have a guess, Tim, as to
About 2,900.
2,900? We have 2,900 what we call value reviews. They are a Prop 8,
Right.
but they are not in the automated system. Correct. And those are the properties that may be estate homes, maybe commercial, residential, that.
Right.
Yes.
And with ag land going up in value, is this basically affecting, even if they're in the Williamson Act Reserve, how much is that going to affect the values that they're having to pay tax on?
If they're under contract, then a change in the market value technically doesn't affect the restricted portion. Now, it could affect the property values that are not under the restricted portion, which would be the improvements, the non-living improvements, the structures, irrigation system, something like that. So, upon a sale, the sales price really doesn't affect that greatly, the assessed value of an ag preserve property, but it can increase it because of the increase of values of those.
Because we've had a pretty good run-up in values here lately.
Yes, we certainly have. We've seen some staggering values, especially in some nut crop values. Yeah.
Any other questions? Mr. Hill, thank you very much for
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
visiting with us, and we appreciate the information.
Thank you, Roland.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 3 is Fruit Patch, and I'll defer to our legal counsel.
Yeah, I just wanted to explain for the record that the board had made its determination at the last meeting. All we needed was some information back from the assessor on the breakdown of the total valuation. And so under those circumstances, I believe it is appropriate for the majority of that panel to go ahead and approve that breakdown, even though Mr. McKinley is not present. And so Mr. Fowler will not be taking part in number 3.
So do we need a motion?
But we need to hear from the assessor.
I have a handout of the breakdowns. I think in the presentation last time, it might have been a little confusing because I said there was an increase due to an audit, but the audit has already been completed and the increased values had been enrolled previously in 2012. That's what the applicant was actually appealing. And so I think maybe my presentation sounded like we were requesting an increase in values, but that wasn't the case. It's already been enrolled in, so they're included.
Yeah, I believe the board's decision, if I remember correctly, was to approve the values on the roll.
Okay.
We
yes.
just didn't know what the breakdown was because the presentation had only been the total, and so we have to report it to the tax collector the way it's broken down on the roll.
Okay.
That's all we needed from you.
Okay.
So we're going to get that later, or?
Well, she just handed out the document that reflects it. So do you want her to describe it for the record?
Unfortunately, I handed all of them to the clerk instead of keeping one for myself to review. I'm sorry.
Let me just double check. Madam Clerk, did I did articulate that correctly in terms of the decision at the last meeting, did I not? Yeah, that they upheld the values on the roll. We just need to know the breakdown.
Okay. Basically, for the 2007 year, the first page, the land value, I'll just read them in. Is that okay with you? Okay. The land value, $131,168. Structural improvement value, $9,094,522. Growing improvement value, $17,975. Fixture value, $8,012,675. Personal property, $1,947,330, for a total net value of $19,203,670. For the next year, 2008, these are all under the same assessment number. The land value is $130,721. Structural improvement value, $9,276,412. Growing improvement value, $16,597. Fixture value, $7,990,902. Personal property value, $2,221,025, for a total net value of $19,635,657. For 2009, the land value is $130,455. Structural improvement value, $9,461,940. Growing improvement value, $11,113. Fixture value, $10,387,042. Personal property value, $3,237,301, for a total net value of $23,227,851. And the last one's the 2010 lien date. Land value, $130,334. Structural improvement value, $9,439,515. Growing improvement value, $15,740. Fixture value, $9,422,706. Personal property value, $2,907,123, for a total net value of $21,915,418.
I do see where your question came from, though. The docket this morning says approve the assessor's value increases.
That's what was on the last meeting.
Yeah. And so what they're indicating this morning is that they had actually already enrolled those.
Right, that's why I thought there might have been just a little confusion, because in my presentation, I did have an area that said there was an increase in value because of the audit, and I listed the amounts, and I
Right.
thought maybe that's what led to.
Those had already been enrolled.
Right, it was
So
already
yeah, because I
done.
do remember the board approving the values as presented by the assessor.
Right, and in a prior hearing in February of 2014, we did increase the values. So I thought maybe that, led to a little.
But we may need, you and Michelle can go back and talk about whether to correct the minutes from the last meeting, because they weren't actually increased from what was on the roll.
Right. That was just from what was motioned
Yeah.
from the last
So,
meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
Anyway, I think we're okay with just the majority present this morning approving that.
You want a motion?
Yeah.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to accept the breakdown as presented by the assessor?
Oh,
Either-
no.
I'm not.
Oh, that was Mr. Fowler. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Morris is not participating in this one. I misspoke earlier.
I'll second it.
No, you're
But
going
you
to
have to
make
make
the
the
motion.
motion.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, to accept the
accept-
breakdown as presented by the assessor.
I said, yeah, okay.
And I'll second it. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, hearing none, motion carries. Okay, moving on to Kings County Truck Lines. Is there anybody here representing Kings County Truck Lines?
They withdrew.
If
According
you
to
look
the
at your
calendar, they
new,
withdrew.
if you look at your new docket from this morning, indicates that.
Oh, okay. In red down below. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 5, Appellate Hospitality. Would you like to step forward, sir? If Madam Clerk can go ahead and read in the case numbers.
Would you like me to swear him in?
Yes, well, I was going to do that afterwards, but you can do it now. If you'd
Okay.
like to be sworn in, sir, along with the assessor?
Madam Clerk, Mr. Weaver from our office is going to be presenting our side of the case, so I'm going to ask him to come forward and be
Okay.
sworn in as well.
Okay.
Okay. Do you solemnly swear to affirm that the testimony you are about to give in the matter now pending before the Assessment Appeals Board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Okay. Please state your name.
Tim Kokendorfer?
Anthony Donato, agent for the applicant.
Corey Weaver?
I'll now read them in.
Go ahead and read it.
Application number 2012000349, APN number 17010203900.
Again, sir, I missed your name.
It's Tony Donato.
Tony.
Dinoto.
Okay,
Agent for
Tony,
the-
if you could give us a...
Excuse me, I'm sorry. You're also with
With Ryan, the agent for the applicant.
Thomson Reuters?
Thomson Reuters was the prior company we were under. Ryan purchased us. We had a discussion with the clerk, and I have a substitution of agency
Yeah,
if
we
you need
need
it.
to make sure that formally gets turned in if it didn't already.
I think that they said they had it, but I have another copy here
Are
if
you
necessary.
Are you okay with it? Yeah, I vaguely remember discussing that, and we decided we needed to go ahead and do it formally.
Yeah. I also have another LOA, perhaps with my name on it, if necessary as well.
If you could give us a summary of what this case is about?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This case is in regards to the Hampton Inn and Suites Tulare. It's a hotel property just down the road here, about 7 miles. This is the January 1st, 2012 Prop 8 value. That's what our application is in regards to. And I have a handout. Should I pass that out at this time, or will the assessor be presenting?
Clerk, we'll go ahead.
Okay. There you go.
What is this?
I believe that's the assessor's case.
Pardon?
That might be the assessor's evidence.
I'm just kind of curious, did we hear a case previously on this same property?
This case was heard last year for 2010 and 2011.
Okay, good.
Yes. I'm here presenting in regards to the new 2012 appeal.
Okay.
There enough copies? Okay. So if you turn to the page 1 of my exhibit, you'll see a photo of the subject property, description, and the site address. It's located at 1100 North Cherry Street. It's north of Merritt Avenue, just west of Highway 99. It's an 86-room hotel built in 2008, with approximately 60,000 square feet. The 2012 assessed value, real property total, is $9.586 million. Personal property assessment, $579,260. So the total assessment on the roll as of 1/1/2012, $10,165,300. The applicant's opinion of value, reconciling two separate approaches, is $5 million to the real estate only. So that's in comparison to that 9.586 number. So on page 2 at the bottom, I indicate that the Hampton Inn and Suites Tulare was purchased on June 26, 2008 for $10,311,466. The sales price for that event was determined prior to the start of construction for the project. It was determined using pro forma income assumptions in a rising market. Clearly 2008 and earlier, the market was very, very hot up here, as Mr. Hill described earlier in his presentation this morning. As the hotel was newly constructed and set to open shortly after, what follows on page 3 at the top is the projected revenue that was supposed to be seen at this hotel. So if you look at the graph on page 3, you can see what's described as projected RevPAR for 2008 to 2015. RevPAR is found by multiplying occupancy percentage by average daily rate. It's a comparison statistic in the hotel industry. The Hampton Inn and Suite Tulari's RevPAR was projected to rise at a rate well above inflation, approximately 33% over the 8-year period shown above, so reaching almost $90 by 2015. In our appraisal here, what we're doing is looking at this property with an income approach to value. A property that produces income is typically purchased looking at the income that it'll produce over a time period or a holding period for that investor. So we feel, and I put this in bold at the bottom of page 3, the greatest weight should be given to the approach that most reliably measures the type of benefits sought by buyers in the market for the subject property. In the case of this property, the income approach is most applicable. So every book has a tab in it. At that tab, directly behind that is page 19. This is the summary of the income and expenses at the subject property. Directly behind that on page 20 will be what I call my direct cap approach. And on page 21, a discounted cash flow approach. These are two different styles of the income approach, and I'll describe them. But I think you'll find it most beneficial to be reviewing those 3 pages as I go through my evidence here. So the first step in the income approach involves estimating the total gross income the subject property can produce. Income from the subject property is produced via rooms, food and beverage, communications, and other departments. You see that at the top on page 19 under revenue, rooms, food and beverage, and other income. The total available room nights must be calculated by multiplying the total guest rooms by 365 days. In a typical year, the subject has 31,390 available room nights. In a leap year like 2012, the subject has 31,476 room nights based on 366 days. You can see that on the actual sheet at the top under available rooms, 31,476. That's the simple math for that. So I'm currently on page 6, but as I said, it might be easier for you to review the actual summaries. Hotel management and the occupancy history of the subject is really based on a theory of the mantra in the hotel industry called heads in the beds. They confirm their primary goal is to maintain occupancy over ADR. They need heads in the beds. They need people staying at the hotel in order to make money. Based on this philosophy, we modeled the growth in our DCF, or discounted cash flow model, higher than historical performance, above the 2012 budget numbers, beginning with 71% occupancy and stabilizing at 77%. For our direct cap, we stabilize at 76%. In the graph on page 6, or the chart, you can see that the highest we've ever seen at this property is 71%. So we're, in both of our income approaches, much above what this hotel has ever done. For the average daily rate, it can be defined as the total guest room revenue for a given period divided by the total number of occupied rooms during that period. We relied most heavily on the actual performance of the subject. The actual ADR has ranged from a low of $83.16 in 2010 to a high of $85.78 in 2011. In our DCF, we begin above the 2011 figure, starting at $91, arriving at $102.42 by the reversion year. So if I look at the actual income of this property, I don't see a single number over $100, and that's what we're projecting in our income approach. I'm looking at the 5th line down, average rate, I see 85, 83, 85, a budgeted number of 91, and the 12 actual performance of $86, $87. And again, on page 21, the DCF that I'm referencing, at the very top, you see the average rates that we're projecting this hotel. If a prudent buyer came and was going to invest in this and they were projecting increases, starting at $91 above what the hotel has ever performed, and based on the budget figure, which would be somebody in the 1/1/2012 market, they would be able to see that budget and they could base their assumptions on that number. But we're trending upward, $93, $96, $99, $102, and also trending upward in occupancy. So revenue per available room, or RevPAR, that's the comparison statistic I mentioned earlier. When placed alongside the projections from that pro forma document, when the hotel was built and when that sales price started their base year value and has trended up over the years, you can see a graph on page 7, and I would like you all to turn to that because this is pretty poignant evidence for our case. The income at the subject property is a level much lower than projected. You see the blue line is the pro forma projections, the same graph that was on a page earlier in my case. The red is the actual RevPAR this hotel has produced. Even projecting increases in our DCF from $64.61 to $78.86 by the reversion year, we cannot support the total assessment of $10,165,000 or the recommended value of $8,279,260. Mr. Kokendorfer, I'm not sure if I'm speaking ahead of myself a little bit by saying that, but that was something that Corey and I had discussed.
Correct.
Okay. So now I'm going to go through revenue. That was just really what the hotel is doing and how we're doing occupancy and where the numbers would hit. But now revenue, we need to say where does that income come together? Room revenue, food and beverage revenue, other income revenue. On page 8 at the bottom, you can see what they've done in actual revenue versus what we're projecting forward in our DCF. Again, we're starting at a number right around the 2012 budget figure, which wouldn't be unreasonable for an investor who is willing to purchase this property. And we're projecting straight increases through our cash flow. An increasing market, ending at $2.5 million of revenue, nowhere near what the hotel has ever done. Expenses, what you have to reduce the revenue by in order to determine what your net operating income is. That's how you come up with, as an investor, what value you're going to base your purchase price on. So this property has rooms expenses, food and beverage expenses, of course. Those are departmental expenses, relate to the departments in which those revenues are coming in. We've taken into consideration in all these departments the past performance of the subject, and you can see on page 9 and 10, we summarize what the subject expenses were, but again, that's also repeated in your tab showing the actual income. So for the purposes of the DCF analysis, we estimate 32 to 30% in rooms expense. In food and beverage, we estimate about 60%, trending downward to 40% of food and beverage revenue. In other expense, we project a decline starting at 220% in year 1, ending at 140% in the reversion year. And for our direct cap, which is on page 20, it's a more simplistic approach. It looks at a single year's income. We're projecting total departmental expenses of 33%. The total ranges from 33.6% in the 2012 budget to 35%, so we feel it's a conservative estimate. Undistributed expenses, which is the next category down as we go through this income approach, are the percentage of total revenues and they're typically fixed and increase based on occupancy and inflation. There's administrative and general expense, which covers the salaries and wages of all the administrative personnel not associated with a particular department. The subject ranged between 11 and 12%. For the DCF, we're using between 12 and 11, trending downward. For our direct cap, we used 11%. Sales and marketing. This includes expenses associated with advertising, sales, and promotion of a hotel, designed to obtain new guests and ensure repeat business. Again, the heads in the beds thing. They need to advertise to get this hotel to have bodies in there. Based on the historical performance, we estimate 9% in both the DCF and direct cap. You can see that falls in line with what had been happening at the hotel. Maintenance is comprised of repairs. It's been between 4.17 and 5%. We estimate 4.5% and 4.25%. In the direct cap, we're only using 4%. Energy and utilities. It's been between 5.7 and 5.9%. We start at 6% and move down to 5.75. In the direct cap, we use 5.5%. Reserves for replacement are a necessary part of holding and maintaining a property. We have calculated this fee as a percentage of total revenues based on the actual expense the hotel incurs annually. We estimated a reserve for replacement fee of 5% of total revenues in both approaches. Franchise and royalty fees. The subject is a Hampton Inn and Suites, and as such pays a franchise fee. We calculated this as a percentage of total revenues. It's just below 5%. We estimated the 4.95% in our approaches. It's management fee of flat 3% is what we use in both approaches. Insurance, about 1.25%. And here's the part that we may need to discuss just a little bit to understand where we were as of 1/1/2012. This is our cap rate selection. So what you're doing when you look at the income and you analyze and you decide which numbers to use, you need to decide how you're going to capitalize that. What is the risk as an investor that I'm going to be incurring when I purchase a property that's going to perform in this way? So as of January 1st, 2012, there are very few comparable sales in the hospitality industry. What follows is an explanation of what became commonplace in the real estate market and hospitality between 2006 and 2012. When this property was purchased back in July of 28, due diligence had been performed well before the time of close, and the projections reflected increasingly ambitious values, not uncommon in this booming economy. Without warning, everything collapsed. I'm on page 12. You can see the names of the well-documented global economic meltdown. Several large multinational banks and companies failed. Personal retirement savings were decimated and property values collapsed. We had Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, Merrill Lynch, Washington Mutual, Wachovia, Countrywide, so many different failures, so much economic collapse. The dramatic downturn sharpened the focus on properties that underwent transactions in the peak economic marketplace. So you saw never before seen statistics for foreclosures, defaults, and particularly properties in the hospitality industry. They got hit very hard. As Atlas Hospitality Group predicted in early 2010, the number of hotels in California in default or foreclosed on continued to increase through the third quarter of 2010. When monitoring the number of properties in default in California, which is the initial stage of the foreclosure process, the volume rose from the beginning of 2009 at 53 properties statewide to 306 by the end of 2009. Of those, 81 were bought or built with loans acquired in 2006 and 2007, when hotel values accelerated. The timing of this subject property was just very poor. They couldn't see what was going to happen in the economy, but they really got hit hard. On page 14 and 15, this is just some evidence of comparable sales that are called paired sales. A paired sale is simply when one property sells twice. Nothing else changes. The location is the same, the property is the same. So it's a great piece of evidence to understand what other factors are happening in the real estate market. So on 14 and 15, you've got a list of about 10 or 12 hotel properties throughout the state of California and 2 sales, starting with 07 sales, perhaps selling 2 or 3 years later. We've got 11, 12, 2010, ideas like this. As you look down the list, if I look at just this Quality Inn in Fresno on page 15, the second one down, April 25th, 2008 sale, $7.9 million. April 2nd, 2009 sale, $5.1 million. That's a 35% decrease on the same property in only 1 year. I think the most poignant evidence in the paired sales is that all the sales occurring before 2008 are significantly higher than their subsequent sales without exception. The best case scenario in the properties was a difference with a negative 22%. That's the best case scenario. Clearly, the fact that income in hospitality properties has not met income expectations from their pre-2008 sales prices is finally being reflected in the market. This discrepancy in the subject property must be considered in the income approach. So with the severe lack of sales, the three most comparable full-service hotel cap rate sales are shown below. We have three listed on page 16. Fairfield Inn in Turlock, the Comfort Inn in Lancaster, the Quality Inn in Fresno. These are all, it was a June 2011 sale, a February 2011 sale, and an April 2009 sale, respectively. The cap rates for the Fairfield Inn in Turlock, which is just off Highway 99, about 128 miles north of the subject. This property has historically outperformed the subject in ADR. The property has 78 rooms. It was built in 2009. That has a cap rate of 8. Cap rate sale 2, Comfort Inn and Suites, $4,450,000. Property is located about 22 miles southeast of our subject. Purchase price reflects a cap rate of 9.1% based on actual income and expense figures according to CoStar. Property has 58 rooms and was built in 1999. Cap rate sale 3 was a Quality Inn in Fresno for $5.1 million. It's about 50 miles north on the west side of Highway 99 in Fresno. Property has 121 rooms. It was built in 1966. The cap rate reflected is 11.98%. Again, it's important to note this property sold approximately 1 year earlier for $7.9 million, which reflects a downward trend as a paired sale of approximately 35%. So after reviewing all the subject property's income information in this report, it's clear the property is not stabilized, but neither are any of the comparable sales from the time frame we can rely on for data. For any transaction or valuation, there are several different cap rates that can be derived or used. The principal variables are as follows. What net income is being used? Is it net income for the period immediately preceding the sale? Is it the net income forecast for the first year? The net income forecast for a stabilized year in current dollars? So when using those questions, it allows the right rate to be applied to the right net income to reflect the most accurate market value. We're currently seeing transactions that reflect cap rates that are, in many instances, even lower than those reported in the 2006 and 2007 timeframe when capital markets were at their peak. The more recent decrease is principally a reflection of depressed cash flows that characterized that 2009 peak performance, which were, for most hotels, historical lows. In researching the market data for cap rates, an article by the noted hotel appraiser Stephen Rushmore provided a clear explanation of the differences. That article is available in our addenda section. It's page A3 in the back of the report, just after the actual performance of the property. Page A3. This is what we're seeing in today's market rates specific to a particular year. Essentially, depending which net income number you utilize, the cap rate will be affected dramatically. For example, if you assume a growing net income, then the historic cap rate, which is based on last year's net income, is lower than the projected first year's cap rate based on projected income. When I look at that chart on page A3 in the sample, the hotel that made, if I look at Hotel B, for example, the 2009 net income was $1,000, and the cap rate reflected on that, let's say, was 5%. The next year, it makes $1,300. That's an annual percent change of 30% positive in net income, and the cap rate reflected is 1.5 points higher. So when these net incomes change and go down significantly, and they're based on down income, then utilizing the appropriate rate is what we need to make sure we're achieving. This is why we apply what we feel to be an appropriate rate to the 2012 budgeted numbers, as this is the best comparison of actual market information to actual market sentiment in hotel budgeting. So in our direct cap, which I think is the simplest approach, we're using a rate, even the range of cap rates is from 8 to almost 12%. We're concluding to a rate of 8% plus the tax rate in our direct cap. That's the lowest end, but we're basing it also on that low income for that reason alone. This is the bottom of the market. This is the poorest the property has done. We're starting with their budget, which is higher than really what they were able to do, but we're using that cap rate. So when we go through all of the assumptions, the income and expense assumptions I mentioned before, and we capitalize that net operating income of $517,258, which is above the budgeted number, which was $432,000. Almost matches what they did in 2012, which an investor wouldn't be able to see. We come up with a total capitalized value of $5,600,546. We subtract the personal property value to arrive at the real property value, rounded of $5,060,000. Our direct cap, in our DCF, because the income projections forecast a much more aggressive growth, we utilize a cap rate of 9% plus the tax rate. So again, in reference to that article that Rushmore wrote, with a higher net income, you need to use the appropriate cap rate, which is why we inflate the cap rate in our discounted cash flow because of the increases we're projecting. You remember the graph that showed actual and really what we're doing, and it's going up. So the net operating income that we come up with in our DCF ranges from $428,000 in year one to over $625,000 in the reversion year. And using the discounts for each year, discounted cash flow discounts the future income back to present worth, we come up with a value of $5.5 million, less the personal property, it's about $4.9 million. So our total value conclusion on page 18 reconciles those two approaches. This is the direct cap and the discounted cash flow method. We weigh them equally. You can see the math in the center of the page. Works out to about $4.99 million. We round that to $5 million for a real property reconciled value opinion of $5 million. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me today, and that concludes our presentation.
At this time, we'll have the assessor present their case.
They may have questions for the applicant.
I think it would be best suited until we wait until
Okay.
Weaver has an opportunity to present our case.
Okay.
I'm fine with that. That's okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me get the... Alrighty, good morning. Just would like to start off and briefly go through the history of this assessment. As Mr. Denoto said, the applicants purchased the property back in July of 2008 for a total sum of roughly $10.3 million. $9.3 million was allocated to the personal property. That sale occurred roughly 3.5 years before the lien date that we are looking at. So essentially, the applicant is claiming that the value of the property has fallen roughly 40% in about 3.5 years. The proposed reduction that we are offering the applicant is roughly about 18 to 19% lower than the 2008 sales price, which we feel more accurately reflects what the market has done since then. The two biggest issues at this appeal that we would like to highlight, and we'll get into it a little bit as I go through the presentation, is whether or not the subject's income and expenses are market. The assessor and the board are required by Property Tax Rule 8 to use expense and income information generated by prudent management. Rule 8 is further supported by Assessor's Handbook 502 to use only the market income and expenses to determine the value and the income approach. This rule is essentially put into place to avoid the argument that my business is being poorly run, therefore it's not worth as much. Actual income and expenses that were reported by the applicant, in our opinion, do not reflect the market. They're at about roughly 80% of income. And the national averages, as indicated by the host report, which is an annual operating statistics study put out by STR, indicates that a hotel of this quality and the fact that it's chain affiliated, the operating expense ratio should be closer to about 65%. Additionally, if as Mr. Donato said, the purchase price was negotiated with pro forma income assumptions. If they are valued by using that income stream it generated, it would seem logical that the revenues would follow that. So we'll run through it a little bit here. So briefly, these are the basics of the case. The taxable value on the 2012 roll, as Mr. Donato stated, was $10,165,300. The assessor's opinion of full cash value is $8,279,000 and $8,279,260. And the applicant's opinion of full cash value, we are using the number that was provided on the application because we were not provided with an opinion of cash value, a full cash value, until today. So we are using the information that we had available to us. The assessor's opinion of full cash value has remained unchanged from the 2011 year. And if you gentlemen will remember, you ruled in the assessor's favor at that $7.7 million. So the assessor's official opinion is remaining unchanged from the 2011 year. There's briefly just an overhead shot of the subject, as you can see, located right off of the 99 in Prosperity. So it enjoys good ingress and egress to the 99. And this is what I touched on briefly. This is the valuation of the property. So this is how the assessor allocated the July 2008 sales price. So we did actually run a cost approach, which is included in your packet. We went ahead and approached this valuation using the three approaches to value. The applicant is only basing their opinion on one approach. They are using two different techniques to one approach to valuation. Can I have a copy of the case? Did we not get you one? I apologize.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you.
So we can run through the cost approach very briefly. We ran some comparable sales for the land and determined a value of $10 per square foot for the land. That comes out to $805,000. And if you turn to the next page, we ran the cost approach using the Marshall & Swift valuation service. And as you can see at the bottom, trended to January of 2012, the indicated value for the property is $8.7 million. So essentially, if the applicant were to replicate the building as of January 1st, 2012, we would estimate that it would cost the applicant about $8.7 million to replace the investment. We feel that further, we feel that does establish an upper range of value for the subject, but we do feel that it supports the assessor's valuation because any prudent investor wouldn't invest more in a property than it is worth. So we'll run really quickly through here. We do have some comparable sales that we feel support the assessor's valuation. The Hampton Inn Inns was assessed at $118,000 per room for the 1213 tax roll. We brought that down a little bit closer to the $95,000 per room number to reach our opinion of value at $7.7 million. The first comparable is the Hampton Inn & Suites located in Clovis. It has the exact same number of rooms as the subject property, and it was also built roughly around the same time. The per room adjusted value is $90,000. The adjusted sales price is $7.75 roughly $1 million. we feel that this comparable sale really supports the assessor's valuation of the subject. The second comparable sale is a Homewood Suites in Fresno, California. That sold in December of 2011, which is really close to our valuation date. That property had 70 rooms, and that sold for $95,000 per room. That property was built in 1998, which is actually inferior to the subject property. And then we run through our third sale, which is the Homewood Suites in Clovis. That property sold for $8.3 million roughly. There were 83 rooms, and the per room adjusted value is $100,000. Year built was roughly similar to the subject at 2010. So this is where we come to sort of the meat and potatoes of the argument. This is the host report. As you can see, the occupancy is at 70%, which is actually really close to the actual occupancy that the subject enjoyed. The subject's actual occupancy rate for year-end 2011 was 71.47%, which is actually higher than the national average. The average daily rate was $89.95. The subject's average daily rate was $85.78, which is very close to the national average. This is where the assessor and the applicant differ. We are using the market expenses as reported by this report. As you can see, they report it as a percent of revenue. The total departmental expenses are to be 25.7%. The total undistributed operating expenses are estimated to be at 25.5%. So those comprise two of the largest categories that hotels incur. The next expense items that we need to address are the fixed expenses. So here's a breakdown of the fixed charges that the host report provides. 4.6% for a franchise fee, 3.5% for a management fee, 4.4% for a reserve for replacement. Property taxes are not an allowable expense, so they are not included, and 1.2% for property insurance. That number is roughly 13.7%. So we'll go to a breakdown.
Mr. Weaver, these pages are not in your book.
This page is not. Essentially, we had a communication breakdown with the applicant. There was a problem with email, so we weren't actually sure that the applicant was going to show up until Thursday afternoon. So we put this together. We can get that printed and provided. This is the only page that is not in there. This page. This page is included in the back. It's not the same page, but it is the host report. It is not the same page, no. And we do apologize. That was a product.
It would be helpful for the board to get those after.
Okay, and we can get those printed. So we are at 13.7 for those fixed charges. So if you look here, we have a brief breakdown. This is the actual total revenue and expenses that were reported by the applicant. As you can see here, and Mr. Donato went through, it seems the discrepancy here is the departmental expenses and the undistributed operating expenses. They're pretty far out of whack. For the 2012 calendar year, the applicant's expenses fell to roughly 75% of revenue. So as you can see, those fluctuate quite a bit on a year-over-year basis. So we ran our analysis and concluded that these subjects' reported expenses were not indicative of the market. So we ran a direct capitalization approach, just as the applicant did. So you can look at it really quickly. There are 86 rooms, using an average daily rate of $89.85, using an occupancy rate of 70%. You get an estimated adjusted gross revenue. I would also like to point out that the applicant's actual revenue was $1.9 67608, which is roughly a $7,000 difference. So then when we deduct expenses, in the report is the amount available for debt service and other fixed charges. If you add that up, it is 35.1%, which gives us a net operating income before recapture and taxes of $692,970. Capitalize that using a 9% overall rate, which is an 8% cap rate plus the 1% tax component, similar to Mr. Denoto. We come up with an indicated market value of roughly $7.7 million, less the FF&E value that we have on the roll, comes up to an indicated market value of $7.12 million using the income approach. So if we take a look at all three approaches of value, the cost approach comes to be $8.7 million. The sales approach is indicated at $7.7 million. The income approach indicated at $7.12 million. We reconciled to the sales approach at $7.7 million, essentially remaining unchanged from the 2011 application.
Okay.
And that is our presentation.
Very good. I'll come back to the panel. Does the panel have any questions of the applicant or the assessor? No? Does the applicant have any rebuttal to what the assessor has come up with?
Yeah, no problem. We're friends, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and the communication breakdown he referenced, it was an email thing. We've been in discussion on the phone. I was actually in Austin, Texas last week out of the office, and I had sent an email prior to last week, but it wasn't received by him. It's a tech thing, but anyways, it is what it is, and we're all here today and happy. So the only thing I would point out, really, there's two. Number one, with the comparable sales, we're looking at a valuation date of 1/1/2012, right? These sales, the first sales from August 21st, 2009, that's a different market. Comp 3, February 5th, 2010, right? But there needs to be a significant adjustment. I didn't, in this, in the presentation piece, it says adjusted sales price. I don't know what the initial sales price was on these. That wasn't explained, but it's something that should be taken into account. We're looking at comparable sales from a much different market. An investor would come in and look at the income. What am I going to make on this property? And that's why I presented the approach in the way that I did.
I forgot to add one thing on the comparable sales. There have been recent sales of Hampton Inns in Bakersfield that are not applicable to the 2012 lien date, but they do support the assessor's value. One sold for $90,000 a room, the other one sold for $100,000 a room. We could not use them in our valuation, but they are pieces of evidence that we considered when we were making our valuation.
Okay.
They can't be used. I don't know why he's talking about them. But
Basically what it amounts to is the lien date value is what's applicable.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
I think the indication, Mr. Noto, is the strength of the market, and looking at those comparable sales, just like listings, even though they're not applicable for the appraisal, would be a good indication of market conditions and whether they're improving or collapsing, as you've indicated in your presentation. So that's why we've included those.
Okay, that's fine.
One of the questions I had on the previous case, and it's still applicable on this case, if I'm not mistaken, there's a new hotel built directly across the street from this one, subject property, and there's another hotel that was built further north, just maybe 1,000, 1,500 feet north. Under the circumstances of either the income approach or looking at net income with the operating expenses, why would someone want to build hotels in this climate?
I think the answer, Mr. Chairman, is essentially kind of in our approach to value. While the applicants claim these doom and gloom conditions, which is what occurred last time they were here, what we've seen even in their own income is an increasing income and increasing market conditions in this local area for hotels, as evidenced by the comparable sales we provided.
Then the next question is, any rebuttal to that?
Well, I would say the time frame would be important. You know, if the market's coming back and they need to add some more volume, because yes, the hotel has improved. You know, I'm not denying that fact. You can see in their net income,
Yeah.
it's increasing. It's still,
The other issue, and I think we went through this last time, and it's reflecting here, is that the incomes seem to be high, or the expenses seem to be high for this subject property relative to the national trend, and if I'm not mistaken, maybe some of the other hotels that you own. In other words, do you own the one in Clovis?
Yeah, the applicant actually purchased comparable sale number 3.
They
are very active in the hotel market locally.
So, in effect, can you give us a reason why the expenses would be higher in this location?
all I can say is that these are the expenses that occur at this hotel in order to maintain the Hampton Inn image. They need to spend this money.
But in effect, if there are some expenses that are allocatable by location that they have, they can just arbitrarily allocate some of those expenses higher in this location.
I don't know that that's true. But
I'm just asking. It's possible, wouldn't you agree?
I'm not sure I understand your question. I'm sorry.
Well, what I'm saying is that these expenses are, some of those expenses are corporate expenses that are allocated to locations based upon, their own records. In this particular case, if the expenses are higher, any reason why they would be higher?
I don't have any reason why they would be higher. They've been consistent through the years. As you can see in the report here, the undistributed goes from 46, 43, 45, 44. That's consistent at this location.
Okay.
But it's also well above national averages.
I think the thing, Mr. Chairman, to point out, when we went through and looked at this particular subject property, we looked at the subject's income and expenses in comparison to the national average. And what we found is in every category, the average daily rate, it all pretty much jived till you got down to expenses, which is why we've chosen to use this market approach and using the income approach rather than using the actual expenses from the subject, because they did not mesh out at the end with what the national averages are, even though every other category does.
Okay. Any other questions from the board members?
That is my recollection from our last time that we've heard from this case. There's such a huge disparity between national averages of expenses and what's actually being presented. That's why I struggle with relying only upon solely the income approach. It's hard to reconcile the two. Why is it so much? And I'm kind of jotting down the differences. And I remember discussing certain things that just seem, well, why is this so much higher, than national averages? And that's a huge impact. Whatever your net is, you're going to capitalize that, and that's going to drive the numbers. So,
of course.
In my opinion, the fixed charges are right in line. So it's the overhead component, and the overhead component is reflected in the departmental and the undistributed operating expenses. So it could be overhead. But just the fact simply that the fixed charges are really close, and the ones that are inclusive of overhead are much higher. Maybe that is where the difference lies. But unless I see the books, I cannot say where those egregious expenses are occurring.
Mr. Morris, I think also to kind of dovetail on that, the indication of the participants in the market of what they would expect for income is Mr. Donato's case kind of hangs on that. We chose not to go that route because it appeared like the actual comparable sales showed something different than what that income approach was doing. And I think reconciling things in this particular case is crucial to getting an accurate assessment. And going through and looking at what the comparable sales indicate, we believe the income approach that we've used is more reflective of market because it does just that, almost mimic what we've got in the comparable sales.
Okay. Then we'll let each side summarize their case. If there isn't any other questions amongst yourselves as far as assessor to the applicant, applicant to the assessor, and we'll let the applicant go first and then the assessor summarizing their case, and we'll consider what we'd like to do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll keep it very brief. clearly we all just discussed the main differences in our case. We're looking at the subject property's performance, what an investor would consider in regards to what this property can do, not national averages, not marketplace averages, and we feel that the income approach is most appropriate based on the conditions of the market as of 1/1/2012. But I'm not going to beat a dead horse, so I'll stop there. Thank you.
You?
To summarize, too, on our side, while we believe the income from the subject property possibly may be less than typical hotels, that could be reflective of poor management, and that's something under the law that we cannot consider in doing evaluation of it. So I would call the board back to what the market indicates to be a reasonable going rate per room for these particular type of properties, as we've indicated in our report, as well as the more applicable income approach using a market method rather than the actual income from the subject.
Okay. Corey?
I'll let Mr. Kokendorfer's statement stand.
Yes.
I'd just like to clarify one thing. Even though the presentation subtracted out the personal property and fixture portion, the applicant isn't objecting to those values. So in the totals, they should still be part of the total full value that's on the roll.
Okay, bringing it back to the board, what is board members' desire? Do we want to take this under consideration? I would suggest that we do that. There's a lot of information here.
Make a motion, we take this under advisement.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. The board will deliver a preliminary result within 60 days, and then we'll go from there. Thank you very much.
The applicant did not request findings, so findings would only be prepared at the request of the assessor.
Right.
And they typically drop that if the ruling of the board is in favor of the assessor. So at this point, there would be no findings if the ruling is in favor of the assessor.
Okay. I'd like to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back promptly in 5 minutes and continue. 2014. Next item on the agenda is agenda item number 6, Wells Fargo Advisors.
Withdraw.
They withdrew. Next item is agenda item number 7, Sunkist Growers. Is anybody here representing them? Would you like to step forward?
Mr. Chairman, we have 7 and 8, and they're both Sunkist Growers, Inc.
It's both the same case? Okay. If you'd like to let the Madam Clerk swear you in?
Yes.
Do you solemnly swear to affirm that the testimony you are about to give in the matter now pending before the Assessment Appeals Board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your name.
Gilbert Arcebo with Property Tax Assistance Agent for the applicant.
Ron Gangloff, Property Tax Assistance Company, Agent Attorney for applicant.
Okay.
And I'd like you, I have Mr. Arceba's spelling, but would you mind giving me spelling of your name for the record?
G-A-N-G-L-O-F-F as in Frank.
And what was your first name again?
Ron.
Ron, okay.
Hey, would you
Chairman,
give us...
I'm going to read the...
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Application number 2012000582, APN number 92000700000. Application number 20120036, APN number 8002548988000. Application number 20120037, APN number 8002548988000. Application number 20120083, APN number 8002548988000. Application number 20120039, APN number 800-254-898-000, application number 2011-00369, APN number 3003030045000.
Okay, if you can give us a brief summary of the nature of the case?
Okay. Before we proceed, I'd like to withdraw the 2012-00582. I previously spoke with the real property appraiser and indicated we'd withdraw on the record.
Which application is that?
2012-00582, the real property application,
The first listed.
number 7 on the agenda.
Okay.
And we wish to proceed on the remaining 5 applications, 2007.
And what is the case about?
Okay, good morning. The issues relate to an audit that was conducted by Tulare County Assessor. Through the course of the audit from 2007 through 2010, there was a series of increases on the assessment, which allowed us the opportunity to review the entire assessment. 2011 is a regular roll application. We are testifying this morning to some value reductions related to ghost assets, functional obsolescence, economic obsolescence, and we also have some costs related to a relocation for this plant. And through testimony this morning, we'll show through the exhibits our position on every one of these issues. But it's a series of issues. We've isolated the issues, and we will address them individually, and we'll provide a value summary per issue. And at the conclusion, we'll provide a full value reduction for all years with the summary.
Okay. May I ask a question? This is citrus equipment?
Excuse me?
Citrus
Yes,
processing equipment?
Sunkist operates an extraction plant in Tipton, California.
And where?
Tipton,
Tipton, okay.
So
This
it's
is
an orange-
This is the juice plant, in other words.
correct. They do oranges and lemons.
Lemons and the whole bit. Okay.
I have all the packages of information bundled, so I'll just give you, it's a big package, but it includes every exhibit we'll be going through this morning.
Okay.
Hopefully not page by page. You know, it's unfortunate. I was noticing when you know we were listening to the previous hearing, and it's nice how on real property everything is nice and tight and clean. In personal property, you're always dealing with a mishmash of assets that are not as clean, and it doesn't lend itself towards the income approach or the market approach. So we're kind of stuck in the cost approach and trying to make adjustments for changes.
Is this value based upon weight? So much a pound?
We're hoping.
It all,
We didn't bring a scale, but if you have one, that'd be great.
what do we
I saw
do with
Christie's
this?
stack of stuff too, so I was a little worried there too.
I'd break my back carrying this thing.
You can leave it here and make the clerk deal with it.
A lot of the information in here just has, it's kind of lengthy, but a lot of it has like the authorization for expenditure requests of the taxpayer when they're putting in new pieces of equipment, and from that you can kind of glean, things or the situation of the operation that kind of has an impact on the value.
How much equipment are we talking about?
In value or
Total pieces?
I wouldn't have a total number, but you mean the equipment dates back to 1946.
Okay.
So you mean it's a series of costs on the books.
We'll let you go ahead and make your presentation, and we'll have some questions.
And kind of in a broad scope, a big part of the case is about companies capitalize their costs, and a lot of companies will have different capitalization policies on cost. And when you have a process that's been in existence for a long period of time, you end up capitalizing changes to the process repeatedly over the years. So you end up kind of in a pyramiding situation. And one of the problems taxpayers run into is that, say for example, you put in a line of equipment for $1 million, and you'll see a single line item on a fixed asset detail or in their on their reflected in their general ledger, and it'll say process line $1 million. You'll see behind that in the detail of the project, a whole listing of what comprises that $1 million. 5 years later, 10 years later, you make adjustments in that, and to that line, you might come in and say, hey, we're going to put in a $300,000 modification to this line. Well, it's difficult to go back into your accounting records that don't really reflect the individual components of the line and to pull out the costs that are being replaced or being modified or being upgraded. So that activity, because the process of a plant is always being updated for efficiency purposes, et cetera, whether you're adding capacity or even whether you're just trying to make things more efficient or make things operate together and function together properly. You're continually going through this upgrade or this efficiency process. And so over years, you'll have hundreds of modifications, and it starts to pyramid in terms of cost. And that's kind of what a big part of the difficulty and what we're having with the plant here.
And that's why the information looks like a lot, because we try to include everything. We actually try to narrow it down a bit. But just to further on what Mr. Gangloff was indicating is, in 2006 and 2007, Sunkist operated two plants. They operated an Ontario facility, which did all the lemons, and then the Tipton facility was strictly oranges. In the 06-07 time period, the declining market conditions for the citrus industry, they had to review their overall operations, and it was determined that Ontario was going to shut down. So in that process, they were going to consolidate operations and just run Tipton. Tipton was going to now have the orange process and the lemon process. And prior to all this, which will be evident in the coming exhibits, the manner that Sunkist operated was very, for lack of a better term, Band-Aid type solution. Their concern was to keep the plant operating. The plant had been operating. Sunkist acquired the property in 1981, but as I mentioned, cost records indicate there's a 1946 assets. So as the plant efficiency was declining, plant managers basically came in and determined we need this, and they'd get the expenditure request, they'd get it approved, and they'd spend a couple $100,000 to fix or repair an item. 6 months later, another thing breaks down, another item of the operation, and again, another $500,000 gets put in. They're a volume-based processor, so they constantly run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The citrus, the acidity levels as well contribute to the decline of the equipment. So all these factors, as well as time, the age of the plant, it's a very old plant, required them that in 06-07 to actually sit down and do some analysis on the plant and determine all the levels of inefficiency. And that's what kind of contributed to a lot of this. In the recent years, they've addressed all their concerns, but it did require about $30 million of cost that was put into the plant, mainly to reestablish it to an efficient level where maintaining the operation was feasible. Because as I said, Ontario, it was not feasible that they had to shut it down because of the age. And to give you an idea, Ontario actually began in 1926. So that was an even older plant. The Tipton plant is old, but it's not to the same level. But it is the technology level and the efficiencies were a big concern. That being said, we'll get into our exhibits. We'll try to run through mainly the highlighted parts. I've indicated a lot of flags for you guys to reference. Those are going to be the pages, so don't think that we're going to go page by page. So if you turn to page 1 of the first exhibit, which is the top pamphlet. This is basically a summary total of our value conclusion, which we will testify through in the ongoing exhibits. I did highlight in red the land and improvement values. That's not an issue this morning. We're maintaining that value. Our reductions are strictly coming off the personal property and fixture assessment. But as you can see, for 2007, our value request reduction is about $3.5 million. For 2008, it's $2.9 million. For 2009, we're asking for $5.5 million. In 2010, we're asking for a $9.6 million reduction. And for 2011, it's a $6 or $7 million rounded. And we will testify in the exhibits to identify each portion of this reduction, what it's attributed to. And then as we previously withdrew, 2012-00582 is a withdrawal. Okay. So if you turn to page 1.
Page what again?
Page 1 on the bottom right corner. It'll be, there's a highlighted,
That same exhibit, yeah.
Okay, so, earlier this morning, we've been hearing the cost approach, the valuation, mass appraisal. So this is basically Assessor Handbook 504. We've highlighted some areas. For property tax purposes, annually, property taxes must be taxed in proportion to its value. The amount of cash or its equivalent that property would bring if exposed for sale in the open market under conditions in which neither buyer nor seller could take advantage of the exigencies of the other, and both the buyer and seller have knowledge of all the uses and purposes to which the property is adapted and for which it's capable of being used, and of the enforceable restrictions upon it. Basically, that's your fair market value definition consistent with Section 110 of the Revenue Tax Code.
Which is the same for personal and real property.
And continuing on to the next page,
What's the next page?
page 2.
Actually, page
Actually,
three.
page 3.
Oh,
Okay, that's,
I'm sorry, mine, I think there was okay, so I'm off by a page on my, okay, on page 3, on page 3, we've highlighted the bottom portion cost approach. The cost approach to value estimates the value of an asset or a group of assets as the original or historical cost of the asset, adjusted to account for changes in value since the purchase or installation. It is the method of valuation used most frequently to value personal property and business fixtures for the assessment purposes because it lends itself to mass appraisal and is employed based on information provided on a yearly property statement. This kind of goes back to what Mr. Gangloff was talking about earlier, where you amass costs over years of operation, and basically it's what we declare on the property statement. But when cost goes back as far as 1946, the possibility of stuff being on the books that physically is no longer there, physically removed, broken, inoperable, is very likely. Most companies or most businesses, they maintain books for accounting purposes. Typically, when a piece of equipment reaches a zero net book value, they're not too concerned with it on the asset listing. But for property tax purposes, they fail to realize that it does impact the value as long as it continues to be reported. So that's basically what the cost approach does. It relies on the historical cost component. So it's important to note that as the age of a property, the potential for an overstated market value is highly likely.
Yeah, one of the differences between the personal property and real property is you're not typically looking at an increasing market on real or personal property. The assessor and the taxpayer typically agree. Everybody agrees that personal property typically depreciates. Just kind of a difference on opinion of how quickly. At some point, the personal property is going to be used up. It's going to be a scrap value or no value or even a negative return to disassemble and remove.
Now on page 5, I've highlighted some areas. And again, back to the historical cost listing. Basically, the assessor's approach to establish a value, it includes an index to make the cost current to current date and a depreciation component to establish the value. If you're reading over the highlighted remarks, in general, these variations of the cost approach use historical original cost information to estimate a reproduction cost new or replacement cost new. Then the reproduction or replacement cost new is adjusted to reflect depreciation to arrive at an assessable value. The second part that's highlighted, use of indexes and percent good factors provided in Assessor Handbook 581 based on the indicated remaining economic life of the subject property, give an estimate of what the market value should be for a property based on a broad but similar market basket. In most cases, it is practical method to apply for mass appraisal purposes, although it does not always reflect all types of depreciation for all types of property. Additional adjustments are necessary. Just summarizing that, kind of the issues we have this morning, the assessor approach is basically relies on the cost. It won't capture the economic, the functional obsolescence, other additional issues that might impact value. And basically that's what this is summarizing. And so our big difference is going to be obviously the depreciation components. We maintain the depreciation that is experienced in this industry and this type of equipment is much greater than that which is being utilized by the assessor in their approach to value.
And some of the specific plant conditions, I assume.
Correct. Continuing on, if we go to page 15, I've highlighted this because in the ongoing exhibits, we're actually going to come back to this, but other applicable costs, if an overhaul extends the life of an asset or increases its utility, the value of the asset may be affected. This should not be confused with minor repairs, overhauls, and maintenance required to continue the existing use of a piece of equipment. These costs do not represent assessable property. In any event, it is important to consider major overhaul costs. The costs associated with a major overhaul may be expensed or may be booked as capitalized asset. In any event, it is important to consider major overhaul costs in the valuation of the equipment if the cost adds value. Again, going back to the value added component, not all cost adds value. The impact of a cost to the actual value, they don't necessarily align. It's not one for one. So those are things that are not factored into the assessment, and we will show in the ongoing exhibits again. And page 16 and 17. So what we did here for you, for the board, is we did the machinery and equipment, which is the bulk of the assessment for Sunkist, is assessed on a 15-year depreciation table. And here we just basically did a spreadsheet with every percent good for the last, from 1999 to 2012.
In case the board doesn't know, that the percent good tables are published by the State Board of Equalization. They publish a different percent good table for each life annually to reflect, slight fluctuations in the market conditions. The purpose of the exhibit is basically to show that there's not broad range changes in the percent good tables that are issued from one year to the next. And an example that you would want to think of, I always use this as a very extreme example, but in the case of economic obsolescence, say for example, it was determined that the government all the manufacturing equipment that was used to produce cigarettes would practically overnight become worthless unless you could sell it to different countries and that. But anyway, there would be a major impact on the valuation.
Excuse me just a moment. Madam Clerk, are you getting the second speaker?
You're going to need to speak more.
You speak fairly softly and our mic doesn't pick up that well. So if you would please.
No problem. Sorry. Remember where I was?
Beg your pardon. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No problem.
You were talking about instant overnight
you'd have like an
obsolescence.
instant overnight obsolescence against the valuation of that equipment, where when you look and see actually the tables, and you do have broad-based changes in the valuation. There is heavy fluctuations in the value of equipment by industry based on what's happening in the industry or economic changes, or even major changes in inefficiencies due to functional modifications or upgrades or technological upgrades to the equipment. But you could see that when you're using a 15-year table, and this table is probably used on 80% of the equipment in California for 80% of the industry, different industry groups, and you can see that it isn't really changing from one year to the next. We know inherently just from our own observations that things change from one industry to the next. So that's what the purpose of the exhibit is.
And page 17, we basically did a graph of those percent goods to kind of just show from year to year, as Ronald mentioned, it doesn't change. During the declining market conditions of 2009, you can see the trend factors of the depreciation component remains consistent, yet we know the depreciation or the value loss attributed during that period was much greater. So basically, we just wanted to show that 18 and 19 is the same type of exhibit, just for a 12-year depreciation table. Just wanted to show you guys, the depreciation components. They don't tend to fluctuate over the last 13 years. Okay. And now if we go through to page 20 on your exhibit. Page 20. Here we're just going to briefly go through some of the terms we keep referring to. So depreciation, for appraisal purposes, is loss in value for any cause. For appraisal purposes, depreciation occurs in two ways. First, and probably most important, the remaining economic life of a property may decline. Instead of yielding benefits for 10 years as when new, a property may now have only 8 years remaining in service. Second, there may be a reduction in the net benefits from the property. Fewer benefits may be provided, or the same benefits are provided at a higher cost. Thus, fewer net benefits are provided. Additionally, below, we have some comments highlighted. The appraiser cannot use the accountant's depreciation estimate when valuing an asset because he or she must determine an estimate of depreciation which directly relates to the actual loss in value the property has incurred. Accountants are not concerned with representing market value at any point in time, but are concerned only with writing off the cost incurred to purchase the asset, excuse me. And again, I put down some notes on the left side, back to the whole accountant. They don't account for the impact of value. They're basically accounting for the cost. It needs to be accounted and built for general accounting principles. But they don't really look into the whole value standpoint, which an appraiser must do. So I just wanted to note that. And if you turn to page 21, here we have the terms again. A property may suffer from one or more forms of depreciation. That is, a single piece of equipment may contain elements of physical deterioration as well as functional and external. Physical deterioration is defined as a loss of value which may result of wear and tear either from use or exposure to various elements. This type of depreciation is expected on most equipment. Virtually all property deteriorates as they age, and it's not abnormal unless equipment is put to excessive use or misuse. Good maintenance will slow the process, while lack of maintenance and overuse will increase physical deterioration. Pretty straightforward, kind of just reading them through for functional obsolescence. Functional obsolescence is a loss in value in a property caused by design of the property itself. When the capacity of a property to perform the function for which it was intended declines, functional obsolescence is present. Functional obsolescence may include such things as changes in taste in the marketplace, changes in equipment design, materials or process, or poor initial design. Changing technology commonly creates functional obsolescence for machinery and equipment, and some functional obsolescence can be or should be considered normal to varying degrees, depending upon the industry and equipment. Older machines and sometimes newer machines or entire lines of equipment, even though still in use, may be made obsolete by new technologies and manufacturing processes, and the market value may be reduced because of functional obsolescence. I would emphasize that point. We'll show in the coming exhibits the scenario that applies to Sunkist growers with technology, where they had to replace existing equipment that was 5 years old, mainly because of the changes in technology and the efficiencies, and they made the decision to replace that equipment. Functional obsolescence may be less tangible or visible than physical deterioration, but it may be more significant. However, it may be curable. An element of functional obsolescence is considered curable when the cost to correct the deficiency is less than the resulting economic benefit. When the cost to correct the deficiency is greater than the resulting economic benefit, the element of functional obsolescence is considered curable. Page 22, top part. Economic obsolescence, a loss of value resulting from adverse factors external to the property that decrease the desirability of the property. This type of depreciation may include the loss of value due to inflation, high interest rates, legislation, environmental factors, reduced demand for the product, increased competition, changes in raw material, increasing cost of raw material, labor, utilities, without a corresponding price increase of the product. Loss in value attributable to economic obsolescence is usually beyond the owner's control and is mostly atypical depreciation. It can, however, be normal in industries where markets have shown long-term sustained and predictable shifts, such as semiconductor and other high-tech equipment.
If I can interrupt you for just a moment. Reading all of these things, we can read these things later as far as what they are. If you could get to, if I'm understanding this correctly at this point, and correct me if I'm wrong, you've gone through and you cleaned the plant up.
Right.
In the process, you're cleaning up your depreciation schedules of equipment, what's applicable, what hasn't been used, what got lost and nobody knows what happened to it. So is that the crux of this case?
For the most part, good summary.
Okay. So in effect, skipping all of this valuation business, which we can read, and to be quite honest with you, it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's good to read this from time to time.
Yeah, I think it's just, we don't come here very often. I don't think we've been here.
So I commend you and bring this to our attention.
Okay. Yeah,
but if we could get to the nuts and bolts of the case, I would appreciate it.
Okay. So basically, Exhibit 1, as we'll call, we basically, just to sum it up, we introduced our opinion of value, the reductions. We kind of went over some of the appraisal terms that relate to our case going forward. And we just wanted to bring to the attention of the board the depreciation factors. It doesn't capture all the different levels of value loss attributed to an ongoing operation. So that would be a good summary for Exhibit 1.
I'd summarize too by just saying, you know, boards and taxpayers, I mean, 90% of the role is real estate. We're typically dealing with the income approach and the market approach. The income approach and market approach deal with economic obsolescence and functional obsolescence and physical depreciation, but it's not called, it is called that, but it's just not referenced like it is in the cost. So since most boards don't deal with too much personal property or very frequently, you know, we always feel it's good to at least discuss the terms as they relate to what we're talking about, because we don't want to assume what you know or what you don't based on.
Sure. What did you just say about real estate?
Real estate on the income approach and on the market approach, the market basically, if you look at a comparable sale, the market takes into consideration loss in value or what the value is due to functional obsolescence and economic obsolescence inherent in a property.
But in effect, the majority of this case, or maybe all of it, is equipment.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
go ahead.
Okay, so now we have applicant Exhibit 2. Is page 1 for you the first, there's a green sticker or there's a tab on top? I want to make sure we're on the same. Okay, so this exhibit will be brief. We have the 5 years under appeal. This is basically the way the taxpayer reports costs to the assessors. Their declaration 571 now. Annually, they have to declare this property statement by May 7th. And here I've highlighted all the 4 categories that we want to emphasize. And for the tab, page 1 is actually the 2007 property statement. What I would like to point out to the board, if you know, on the first category is machinery and equipment, the highlighted. Begins with the 2006 cost basis, and it runs all the way to 1984. And you can see in 1984, they report about $8.5 million of equipment. That cost extends beyond 1984, but that's just the last sum year that you put all the cost into. So I just want to point out to the board, you know, the historical cost basis going all the way back. You know, as you can see, in 2003, there was a big cost increase. They put in about $1.4 million. In 1997, they put in another $1 million. In 1994, they put in another close to $1 million. In 1990, they put in about $1.6 million. And then again in 84, there's a sum of about $8.5 million. As you can see, equipment runs very old. With age, typically comes a lot of issues, inefficiency issues, repair issues. And again, with the plant being a volume-based plant, you know, they run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You know, they need to keep the equipment going at all costs. You know what I mean? They don't have the time to try to remove stuff, to put it in, mainly because the period down costs them money. So typically, they just tend to repair, overhaul, rebuild type of cost. If you look at there's the third column highlighted. This is the assessor depreciation table. You know what I mean, kind of just to go and just a quick analysis of it. If you look at the 2003 to 2006, basically, if you take the cost that's reported against those trend factors, that's the presumed value if you were to turn around and sell the equipment. You know, so after 4 years of running this equipment, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you know, based on the assessor trend tables with the depreciation factors, you know, it's presumed that the taxpayer would recover close to 90% of their initial cost, which is highly unlikely. You know what I mean? There's a lot of sunken costs you put in at the initial, once you put something in, and, you know, for 4 years worth of equipment running 24/7, the possibility of obtaining 90%, it won't really happen in the marketplace. So that's kind of...
There's another question that I had that's pertinent. We constantly are seeing people present values based upon component parts versus the value based upon the entity on an ongoing basis. I mean, you mentioned the plant runs 24 hours a day. That's an ongoing basis, I think. So the point I'm making is this. Are you reflecting these values that you're going to be presenting on a item-by-item basis based upon what the fair market value would be if you removed it, put it on the market, sold it, and shipped it to the prospective new buyer? You're valuing this on an entity basis. Is that correct? How much the plant is worth. Somebody steps to the plate and says, that's a very good-looking plant. How much do you want? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. It's an in-place value of the plant. not necessarily a going concern. You're not selling with it necessarily your employees, your customer base, your product base, any of your
Good point.
technology. You're basically saying that the physical, tangible plant sitting
Now,
there.
do you know of any plants for sale in the last, or when the value was reflected on this application that's sold?
Well, the subject property, there was a transfer, but it wasn't a sale.
In other words,
But I'm not
there
aware,
it's
I'm not aware of
it's
any
not an
other-
arm's length transaction, it's just a transfer.
Correct. So, yeah, I'm not aware of any.
You're not aware of any other plants that sold?
And even then, just to elaborate on that, it's always difficult because the way they value the, you know what I mean? It's difficult to obtain just a specific value for the equipment because of that. There's other components that would factor in.
Didn't necessarily mean to interrupt you again, but to be quite honest with you, I'm kind of curious to see where we're going with this.
Yeah, and kind of like what you're saying, if I interpreted your question correctly, you know, it's not, we're not getting a value if we turned around and sold this and put it in a container ship and shipped it off to another country. We're basically accounting for the loss of each of these factors and the way it impacts the value. And our conclusion value will be a series of adjustments.
Okay.
Accounting for the functional, the economic, the ghost assets.
Fair enough, continue.
So that's the 2007. If we turn to the next sticker, which would be the 2008, again, very similar exhibit. I've included all, I've included all the fixed assets in the event there was any questions. I wanted to have everything for you guys. But again, it's a very similar, as you can see in 2006, when they started consolidating the plants, Sunkist started making a lot of the infrastructure improvements needed to accommodate the consolidation. That in 2006, they put in $2 million of additional equipment, infrastructure type. And in the ongoing exhibits, we'll get a little bit more detailed with that.
Well, just to clarify that, they put in $2 million of additional equipment and modification to accept the additional equipment, and also modification to correct process flow.
Okay.
Yeah, and it would be important to note too that the process remains the same. They're still doing oranges. They're still extracting orange juice, taking the oil from the orange oil. They keep adding costs, but they're not changing the process. They're not making anything different. It's basically doing what they started doing in 1981. They're just trying to make it efficient for themselves. If you turn to the third tab, again, this 2009 business property statement. As you can see with the cost, you're starting to see upper costs in the upper years. In 2008, they added about $5 million in leasehold improvement fixtures. They added $1.4 million in machinery and equipment. In 2007, they added another $1 million. In 2006, they added $3 million. And also to note, in 1984, they still continue to report the $8.5 million from the original plant when they took over. The other part that's it's important to note too is that the process, there's the footprint of what the plant runs. You have your delivery part where the oranges get dropped off. They go through a flume process delivery to the extractor. The extractor takes the juice. From there, it flows through a process into the refrigeration to remove water and so forth.
Let me interrupt you one more time. Years ago, 30 or 40 years ago, when I was an employee of a small CPA firm, they sent me out to Lindsay, I think it was Lindsay, to report on juice plant. New concept in Tulare County. First one put in, okay? And they said, well, Mr. Accountant, would you like to take a tour? And they took me on a tour, and they showed me how the fingers go over the top of the orange, and the juice. Oranges have oil? Oh, yes, they have oil. And we extract that oil, and we basically condense it and put it in the freezer, and we sell it off in 50-gallon barrels. And, by the way, the peel is dried and fed to cows. So we have an appraiser here. Have you ever seen a juice plant run? Yeah. They're very interesting, okay? Has anything really changed in juice plants in 40 years?
The recoveries, that's one of the issues that you'll see in the functional, but the equipment that's designed now can recover about 85% more of the oil, which translates because it's sold on a pound basis. So the recoveries on some of these items.
But you're still selling the outside peel as cattle feed?
For example, Sunkist, I didn't know this before I did this, but
yeah.
Coca-Cola uses a lot of that orange extract in their beverage. So they sell a lot of that oil to Coca-Cola, which is an ingredient in Coca-Cola.
Okay. And basically what I was getting at is that we don't operate in a bubble. We do have some knowledge of what's going on, so I continue.
Okay. So, we're just basically trying to point out the continuing increase in cost while the bottom part of the equipment, it remains consistent. They're not writing anything off. The process is the basic footprint of the plant. If you put in a new extractor, you remove the existing extractor. You can't have 5 extractors because there's only room for 2. So that's kind of what we're trying to show in the cost, that you can't keep adding equipment to a process that only holds for specific pieces in the flow process. If you go to the following tab, again, it's 2010 property statement. Again, just pointing out the top years. In 2009, they added an additional $5 million of equipment, infrastructure type related to consolidating and preparing the plant, efficiency equipment. So, as you can see, they continue to add costs, but again, in 1984, they continue to roll the $8.7 million in cost. And, just to give you an idea of the way the depreciation tables work, that's still valued at about $1.2 million. So annually, they're paying about $1.1 million in value for equipment that's 30 years old. So that's just kind of what we're trying to show in these exhibits. And lastly, for 2011, the last tab, which is page 149, again, they put in an additional $2.5 million on top of the 5 from the prior year. And in 1988, they're showing $10.6 million, which is basically just the accumulated total of the bottom years. And the value for the 1988 cost is about $1.4 million. And again, I bolded all the additions for the board. They are putting a substantial amount of equipment to basically do the same thing. Basically going to do the same type of process. They're going to continue to extract juice from oranges. And another item that I would actually add too is that these efficiencies improve because as the oranges are left out in the field because of the speeds of the plant, the temperatures dry out the fruit, which is basically costing them, output. The summer heats, they told me out here, reached in the 110s, 100, and the longer the fruit sits in the holding area, the less juice that's going to be extracted from them. So that was also a big issue when they're trying to process these oranges. So that'll conclude number 2. Okay, now we're actually getting into the issues. We'll go through exhibit number 3. If you turn to page 1.
That would be this thin one?
Yes. And page 1 has a blue Post-it with some figures written in.
Would the board mind if I took my jacket off?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, a little warm.
There he goes.
So here we have the board memorandum from Sunkist. So I'll go ahead and read it. As a special strategic planning session on July 13, 2010, management reviewed critical capital needs necessary for the efficient and safe continuation of the CJ&O, which is citrus juice and oil business operation. Such items include the implementation of an additional flume feeder system, sizers for B and C extraction lines, an additional silo for single-strength juice, upgrade of the JBT waste system, and various environmental and safety projects. These items are foundational with respect to the optimization of the Tipton facility. As these projects need to be started as soon as possible in order to be operational for the upcoming naval season, management seeks approval of a supplemental capital request in the amount of $8 million. Of course, the $4.4 million for the future flume feeder and sizers represents a payback of 3 years. And at the bottom part, I kind of summed up the budgets. In 2007, it was $5.3 million that was put in. 2008, they spent $7.2 million. 2009 was about $1.9 million. And 2010 was $13.5 million. And lastly, for 2011, it was $2.5 million. So the total for the 5 years was about $27.4 million in equipment that was put in. And I'd also mention in the highlighted top paragraph, it mentions the flume feeder system. This was actually put in because the existing structure was so old, it was deemed not structurally sound that they had to demolish it and put in this whole process, just to kind of show the board the age of this plant, that, the delivery system was so old, it actually was not, it didn't pass inspection. So if you turn to page 2, again, I apologize, this copy didn't come out, but it kind of just goes through all the different areas that they're improving. There's some comments from the taxpayer where they put, it increases the plant output from 45 tons an hour to 88 tons an hour. That's basically by putting all this, the speed and the efficiencies improve. You know, it's a bad copy, but I mean, there's some language here that says required to address capacity issues with sizes or tilt belts, required to maintain plant upkeep, required for safety, you know, increases recovery for lemons. So basically just trying to show the board that all these things were designed to increase the efficiency of the plant. If you continue, you know, I think in this exhibit, if we go to page 20, I think I should do this. I think you guys understand so I'm not going to go on page by page because it's basically all the different items.
Thank you.
I think if we go to page 24, which there's a green sticker on, this is a summary report that was done, this appeal during the initial stages. I mean, we've been working with the assessor on this for a while, so we did have some communication, and this was put together by the taxpayer. So it shows purpose to align changes in plant processes and yield recoveries as they relate to capital projects over the last 4 to 5 years. And this is a pretty good summary of all the areas that they improved or corrected. You know, background. Over the past 4 years, the citrus juice and orange business unit has experienced several significant changes in the way it operates. These changes include the consolidation of the Ontario and Tipton plants, change of extraction lines from Brown to JBT, installation of a new receiving flume system, refrigeration system redesigns to accommodate the increased capacity, major infrastructure overhaul, and streamlining of the production process.
If I can interrupt you one more time. Going back to, again, the actual merits of this case, what does all of this background information have to do with the actual merits? Like, for instance, what the board wanted to do with the plant as far as, I understand they wanted to upgrade it. I mean, you've made that point.
Well, these are the summaries of what they did. We're trying to, I guess, establish foundation to the board to show that there was obvious issues with the plant, beyond me just letting you guys know this morning that the plant was old and it needed some repairs. So basically, it's a little bit more detailed as to all the different processes that came together and review. The taxpayer basically identified every of the inefficiencies in the operation.
I think we got that.
Yeah, I think some of it will come clear as we kind of progress through. But you know, if we just hit the meat or the information, would be going, well, what does this have to do with the value, or how you're translating the value? So we're just kind of setting the foundation, because a lot of the things that are discussed here are relate to issues where we're actually asking for a reduction in the value. So
yeah.
I guess
I'm with
however
you.
you order it, it's...
In other words, I want you to present your case fully.
Yeah.
On the other side of the coin, I think some of this is repetitious, but continue.
Okay. So I'll read then the consolidation and the extractor line, because that'll be an issue on the functional side we discussed. I'll read that for you, and then you guys could review the remaining.
Or if you just want to read it right now.
Or if you guys want to read it without me having to read it, the consolidation and extractor line.
Well, what I'm saying is I would like you to get to the meat of this issue. And if there's something in the background that's pertinent, bring it up. I mean, I'm telling you, go ahead and do that. But in effect, what I'm getting at is I think the next thing I would like to hear is that what values did you actually come up with and why you came up with them, and in this process of rejuvenating and cleaning this plant up. As far as why you did it, I mean, I would assume the board would do this to make money, right? I mean, nobody's going to spend money on a plant so they don't make money, okay? So we got that part. So just go ahead and continue and give us the facts.
Okay. So the consolidation, we kind of mentioned, just he went through a series of consolidation. It was a series of phases to implement the whole consolidation of the two. As I mentioned previously, Tipton was strictly oranges. Now they actually handle oranges and lemon. The lemons were brought up. The lemon process was actually in Ontario. So, kind of just, we'll go into the extractor line change. In mid-2008, a task force was developed to review the extraction line process, determine the feasibility of utilizing Brown versus JBT extractor technology. As the Brown extraction line contract was due to expire, In mid-October 2008, executive management proceeded with authorization to remove the brown extractors from Line B and begin installation of JBT extractors. Once completed, Line B North brown extractors were changed for JBT extractors. By early 2009, all brown extractors had been removed and JBT extractors installed. Line B North and South extraction lines now consisted of JBT extractors with brown sizers. So back to you, this is going to be the functional obsolescence issue. Basically, the removal of the brown extractors to the JBT extractors was a big issue. The speeds that they can obtain with the JBT was newer technology. There was a lease coming due, so basically they had to make a decision. We need more throughput because we're consolidating. So they made the decision to change the extractors out to the JBT. But in addition to that, if the sizers was what became the bottleneck of the operation, which we'll testify to, because now they had two different levels of technology that the sizers could only feed the line 50 tons, but the output for the extractors was 95 tons. So until they corrected those sizers, they suffered from that obsolescence until it was corrected.
So they removed all this other equipment?
Eventually they had to, and it was 5-year-old equipment, which was...
A 5-year-old equipment?
It was 5-year-old
They
equipment.
put it in a storage place on the premises?
No, they disposed of everything.
It was gone?
Yeah, because basically they have to pull out the extractor.
Did
had
they
to pull
sell
out-
it, or did they just dispose?
My understanding, everything was scrapped because they did a massive write-off of equipment, which will also show in the coming exhibits, where everything that they
Right.
and a lot of times it's included in the bids, which will show you. It includes the disposal and removal of the existing
But
equipment.
it wasn't removed from the property tax reports, is what you're saying.
Okay.
But that'll be the big issue on the functional.
The whole thing we're boiling down to is you've got some equipment there that you're accelerating the depreciation on for depreciation, be it functional, economic, whatever you want to call it. You had a value, and you accelerated the value because it had one of the functional or whatever depreciation. Is that what we're getting down to?
Correct. We calculated the loss of value
So
too.
you have a value, purchase it here. What's the economic life?
Of equipment, the equipment?
Yeah, well, when you purchase that equipment, you pay this for, what's the economic life of that piece of
Even though you got rid of it in 5 years?
All right.
Well, that's the big issue is the economic life of equipment based on some of the the lack of retirements, but the constant replacement.
Well,
I mean, it varies between 3 to 6 years sometimes. Some of
In
the
any corporation, when you have it, you have a basic value paid for it. You set up a depreciation factor on that. When you come out to it, you take it out, you have a zero.
Yes.
That equipment is no longer there. It has zero value at that point. Do you follow me? Now,
No,
the
but-
county comes along and says, well, our records indicate that this has a 10-year value. Is that what we're talking about here? You're placing a 10-year value, you're placing a 5-year value. Is that what's going on here?
Not necessarily, because that
Well,
almost...
we can understand that you're running this equipment 24/7, and it's going to wear out. So if the county's putting 10 years on, the economic life is 5 years, that's what you're doing, it has zero cost, no?
No, because the machinery equipment for all years under appeal, the assessor applies a 15-year table, which is a 15-year depreciation table.
15-year depreciation.
That's
You're
okay.
accelerating this by the functional,
Yes.
accelerating
As
depreciation.
opposed to accelerating it through requesting a lower economic life, we're basically looking at some of the costs that we don't think are out in value, or some of the costs that were removed that shouldn't have been removed, and taking a penalty for functional obsolescence against.
I mean, if you've got equipment in there from 1946, you've got a zero value on it.
On the books, we have zero, but for assessment purposes, it would hold
Well, the taxation value, it has zero.
Well, no, it would have a minimum percent good, which is about 14% of the cost.
You guys
There's always a small,
Pardon?
there's always a minimal value for property taxes.
Yeah.
As long as you're.
But in effect, if it's jerked out of the plant, sold and disposed of, you can't go back and say, well, let me bring it back. You made that decision to upgrade, dispose of,
Correct.
and whether it's not an idea of putting it in the back room and let's see how it'll work.
Oh, no, that's one of the issues that we have is exactly the case. When you put something in, they have to remove it. So it's physically gone, but it doesn't run back all the way to the accountant and taken off the books. So typically for accounting purposes, their concern is always book value. And typically after 10 years, it has zero book value. So to them on the books, there's no consequence, but they don't realize that for property tax purposes, as long as the cost is on the books, you're paying tax on it.
Right.
As low as 14% is typically the residual value. And also to clarify your point is the depreciation table. The assessor uses a 15-year table. We're not asking this morning to change the life. That's a whole other issue. And the assessor's bound by the whole California Assessors Association, and they're dictated which lives to use. So they're basically doing what the guidelines prescribe. We're basically trying to capture the loss in value related to these issues. And, you know, I mean, the calculations vary per issue.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
That's it, yeah. Is that all right?
No, continue.
Okay.
So
So
you're,
that would conclude Exhibit 3.
I was just saying, so boiled down to its essence, the argument is that the 571Ls were inaccurate.
No,
The
that's not necessarily the case. You almost have to have at least some discussion about what a company is intending to do and what they're required to report on a 571L. You could argue that the return is inaccurate, but that wouldn't really be exactly true. The taxpayer doesn't prepare its books and records for the 571L. No taxpayer does. It's almost like an offshoot. You know, the property taxes is like way down low on the totem pole of the purpose for maintaining a company's books and records. Their main purpose is for capturing the depreciation and applying the depreciation over the appropriate amount of revenue, you know, matching their expense with revenue as you know, CPA is looking at it. And, you know, a company will go and they'll make an expenditure of cost, and the accountant isn't thinking, well, how much value, how much utility are you adding to the property that we're talking about? You know, the assessor's looking at a function of, hey, value this plant, this equipment. The accountant's looking at it, hey, we just made an expenditure. It could be very repair in nature. It could be somewhat upgrade in nature. It could be increase in capacity in nature. They're not thinking in those appraisal terms. They're just thinking, we capitalized a cost. We put the costs on our books. We are required to report to the assessor on the business property statement all costs that match our general ledger for our machinery and equipment GL account, for our office furniture, for our fixtures, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then it's up to the appraisers, the county, to assess the property at fair market value, to look at the detail of the components and determine whether or not those individual items are added value or not. So I hear what you're saying. You know, could you address that in the cost and the reporting? Yes and no. Our experience as a taxpayer has been that if you extract cost from the business property statement, which is included on your general ledger under an account, it's going to just be automatically picked up in the audit, because the auditor is usually just looking at your general ledger totals, what you reported on the business property statement, making sure they match without actually looking at the detailed component of the costs that are reported.
Did that answer your question, Robert? Okay. All right.
Sorry if it was
Continue to substantive issues.
Should I go in detail with this? So the next exhibit is 4. This is probably the biggest exhibit for the board.
Yeah, give them. This is what we look at. This is how we summarize it.
Okay. And just so that the board, I mean, we're not going to go through all of this. You guys can review it after. I just wanted to, basically, we're establishing foundation with all the improvements that were put in. These are some of the capital appropriation requests for some of the big cost items that were put in through the 2006 through the 11 period.
And just to describe that into that accounting system we were talking about, you know, on the fixed asset detail, that's the highest level of detail you'll see that is supposed to match to the general ledger. On the fixed asset detail, you usually see a one-line description, an acquisition date, a total cost, a basic description of the asset that's going on. This is basically just stepping up one level, and when the property was requested to be built and purchased, there's usually a lot more information that goes into, you know, well, what are we buying, why are we buying it, you know, what's the payback, what's the purpose, what's all the things that go into it. But as far as accounting and data entry, it doesn't, you know, you can't put in, you know, a 5-page informational detail. It's usually just comes down to one line item.
And just
But
so
it has
the
the
board-
date and the acquisition cost.
Yeah, but this we're just showing you the one step up detail behind that.
And your other ledger should show that acquisition cost, price, the date, and the depreciation schedule.
With a far better description of what it is what
What
we're
it
looking
is.
at. Yeah.
So
Well, if it's a piece of equipment, no matter what it is, and you paid X amount for it, and you set a depreciation factor on it. If it cost you $10 million and you bought it yesterday, when you start the depreciation based on what? Economic life of?
Well, if you're just talking about yesterday, I mean, arguably that would be kind of like purchase price and how you look at, purchase prices of a subject property. That's kind of the premise of the cost approach is that you're looking at what something costs you as of a particular date, and that cost, as long as it's not reflective of other non-assessable or non-value-added items, would be the fair market value as of that date.
That's correct.
So, types of little issues that you run into, which, I'll kind of say it again, not just very briefly, when you're talking about adding a cost into an existing process, and you're talking about the removal of existing cost, you might be talking about being under the gun to make a quick repair or a quick rebuild, as Gilbert mentioned earlier. The company can't have downtime, right? They're looking at, hey, if they have 2 or 3 days of downtime unnecessarily during crop production time, you're in trouble. So you might actually be forced to keep the process going to expend a significant amount of money in overtime and rush service, if you will.
What's that all got to do with this piece of equipment?
It has to do with the value of the cost that you're reporting.
Cost added.
Or cost subtracted.
Either way.
Well, that's kind of why when she raised the question, is the 571 incorrect? Well, isn't it really incorrect? Basically, aren't you saying we put all this cost in, we had all these old costs basically, and we had to improve these lines, and we understand all that. There's a lot of stuff going on, but there's all these costs previously that were reported because you have to. They're on the GL, you got to report them on the 571, all that stuff. I understand that. But the costs weren't reduced.
I'm not trying to be
So the 571's overstated.
Yes, I'm not trying to be dodgy with that question or anything else. I think that the way I see it, as a taxpayer, we're not required to provide the 571L isn't our appraisal of the property.
No, it's just historical cost.
Just a historical cost basis of what we've acquired over the years.
But if you've improved something or replaced a line, you need to take that old line off, and you're basically saying that didn't happen.
That's true, yes.
Okay, so the 571 was overstated.
And yes,
okay.
As far as it goes,
you
can move on.
We have an exhibit coming up where I show that. It's basically appraisal versus accounting, because the books are maintained for accounting purposes.
I understand.
And but I do have an exhibit that will provide a lot of scenarios for the board, and I think it's a good exhibit that will clarify a lot of this. And it's actually after this upcoming one.
Okay.
So board members, this exhibit, I apologize, it's 380 plus pages. Just so you know, each one of these flags is a different capital appropriation request for the board. Capital appropriation, basically, when you're requesting $1 million, you need to justify it to the board and gets the appropriate signatures for approval. What I'm trying to show here, if you turn to page 1, this is the sizer and in-feed improvement. This relates to the functional obsolescence. I went ahead and included a post-it with some language in each one of these to kind of explain what's going on. It's a replacement project that corrects plant inefficiency and removes a lot of the old layered costs for the sizer. In the next exhibit, with related to the cost that's on the books that's not there, we can identify about 5 different sizers on the books when we know there's only physically 3 sizers at the plant. There's a 1982 sizer, there's a 1990 sizer, I believe. There's these 2005 sizers. So we're basically trying to show for the upcoming exhibits that when you put this stuff in, the existing stuff is removed. But before I get there, I'll just read, some of the justifications. Increased throughput, reduced labor hours, as more fruit tons will be processed in less time. Reduction in kilowatt hours for an energy savings. Allow business unit to process higher volume tree crop tonnage delivered to processing plant. Fruit sitting in less time on site reduces potential risk of decay. And this is $1 million capital appropriation request. But if you turn to page 5, this kind of gets into the whole discussion with the assets that are on the books that physically aren't there. But if I read this is for the sizer. JBT Tech, Food Tech will provide labor and materials to install throughput improvements to line B. Work will begin with the demolition of the existing brush washer and installation of a new JBT 64-inch wide washer chutes, and extension of the existing surge bin pull-out belt. Also included is the demolition of the existing sizer, roller spreader at the existing sizer infeed, and the upper platform will be modified to support the new roller spreader and 6-lane chute. Again, just trying to show, for the ghost assets and the coming exhibits that we keep talking about,
Let me interrupt you one more time. Years ago, someone told me that information is like a pyramid. You see something at the very top, and then you drill down. It appears that what we're trying to do is to take the bottom and drill up. See what I'm saying? So if I could ask you to do that for us, and this is the second or third or fourth time I'm alluding to this and basically saying, let's start with the top. A one-page summary of where we're going.
Yeah.
And then start to go down to the detail.
Go to the value.
Can we do that?
They want to go to the values immediately.
Mr. Azunian,
Work backwards
maybe
to-
they'd like to take a little break and organize themselves for 5
Okay,
minutes.
would that be helpful?
As what I'm hearing the board say is, if,
I have
if
it.
things
I have
weren't taken off, then where's the list of what was really there?
I have it.
I have that in the next exhibit.
Yeah, but we may get to that at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We'd like to get to that about 10 minutes.
Okay, all right, well, again,
Do you want to take a
No, we
break?
could.
Yeah, let's take a
we can go back
5-minute
to
break
this. They're not saying don't.
and regroup,
And let's talk about
and then we'll continue.
Okay.
after this, it's
Yeah. Others.
Let's continue.
okay. So I guess we could put away the large one. That's Exhibit 4. If we go to number 5, which is the next one. So getting to, so if you go to page 19, for the board, this goes back to the ghost assets we keep going back to. Page 19, 20, 21, and 22, 23. Sunkist did a physical inventory in 2010. The plant manager and the personnel at the plant went through and identified everything that was physically no longer there, and identified it. And the manner that they did was either it was gone through demolition because of replacement. Physically, they could not locate it, and they went through and identified everything. I did write some notes at the bottom. About 70% of the cost is from 1995 and prior, dating all the way back to 1946. If you look at skim through the detail, you'll see a lot of redundancy. There's a lot of pumps, a lot of peelers, sizers, etc. Now to the value portion, you turn to page 24 to 27. On page 27, there's a $2,451,917,000. That's the value that's attributed to these ghost assets on the tax roll. Sunkist is paying tax based on this value. Basically, we applied the cost that's on the books, applied the depreciation factors that the assessors utilize in their assessment, and it comes up with $2.5 million roughly. So
This is value of no longer utilized equipment, is that what you're telling us? It's sitting out of the junkyard, you got $2 million worth of equipment out there, is that what you're telling
Or
us?
just plain gone.
Pardon?
Or
It's
just
gone.
plain gone.
Or just plain gone?
Just plain gone.
None of it has a zero on it, does it? It's all sitting out there.
yeah, it's either scrapped, it was demoed in replacement, or they just can't locate it over the last 30 years. They can't physically find that description and that piece of equipment. So the taxpayer actually did a physical inventory and did a massive write-off after this inventory. So the value component for 2007 is on page 27. The bottom number, the total cost is about 6.8 million, but the value attributed to this cost is $2.4 million. And that's our value reduction request for 2007 for that issue for the ghost assets. If you turn to page and on page 31, there's a highlighted number on the bottom right corner. That's 2.5 million. So if we take all this cost and apply the depreciation factors for 2005, we come up with the value of 2.5 on the roll that they're being taxed on for equipment that's physically no longer there. It's either obsolete to the point they can't locate it, etc. For 2009, turn to page
36.
36, we have a value of 2.6 million. That's the requested reduction for the ghost assets for 2009. And then 2010 is the last year with this issue because, as I mentioned, they were written off for the 11 return. But for 2010, the value of these ghost assets is $2.6 million. And again, just applying the depreciation, and that would be the value reduction for this issue. The remaining tabs for the board, I went ahead and I spent a lot of time looking at the capital appropriation request, and I included some exhibits for you that show repair type items, and it shows, basically repairing bearings. We need to get this done. Every 3 years they fail, $100,000. It's they capitalize it. You see a lot of items like that, or a lot of regulatory changes that need to be done. So that's the remaining tabs. That just basically trying to show support to the board that repairs are constant, and the cost is significant.
Which leads to the excess reported items, right?
So that would summarize the numbers for the ghost asset issue. That issue is for 2007 through 2010. 2011, it was reported correctly on the property statement, so the ghost asset issue went away. That's no longer an issue since they did do a master write-off. That would conclude this issue on the ghost assets. Now, if we go to the next stack, we have applicant exhibit 6. This issue, this is so I've been mentioning this consolidation. When Sunkist made the decision to consolidate the plant, they contracted a food processor consulting firm that basically was asked to prepare the consolidation, the move, the demolition of the Ontario plant, and then bringing everything into Tipton. So there's a lot of the logistics, a lot of the costs associated with the infrastructure that needs to be put in, and the contracting. If you turn to page 1, this is
describe that a little bit more, though. That includes basically the removal of the Ontario facility. So it was like an overall study that was done. It doesn't include the actual labor and the equipment installation or the delivery. It's basically a study that was done at the bequest of Sunkist to remove the existing facility and integrate it with the new facility.
Correct. And most of that cost, they basically transferred it from one book to the other, so it would include a lot of the installation and so forth. It was basically more just an analysis to determine what's the best way to do this. So if you look at page 1 of this exhibit, we broke it down by year for the board. So it basically comes down to 2 line items that's being reported on the books. Because of the size of the cost, it had to be capitalized. You couldn't expense $1 million. But it's 2 separate phases, as I mentioned, on the consolidation. You have project management phase 1, and that was $312,000. And then you have, in 2009, you had project management phase 2, and that was $615,000. This cost is basically the same cost for 2010, 9, and 8. So the total combined reduction is $2.7 million, and that's for 4 years. For 2011, it's the highlighted figure, which is $822,124, is a requested reduction for 2011 for this issue, in addition to the ghost assets. Then for 2010, the requested reduction based on this cost is $868,000. For 2009, the total for this cost, taking the cost against the depreciation factor, is $721,000. And lastly, for the 2008, it's a $285,000 reduction.
So you're asking for a reduction in the value for all the fees involved of moving this equipment from Ontario to Tulare?
Well, it's not the fees for the move, because those are actually capitalized.
The consulting fees.
It's basically, they contracted this company that's the expert in, redesign and all these relocation. So this was their consulting fees, basically how to establish a game plan to do this move. The actual
This cost of your equipment, is that what you did? Added it to the equipment you moved from Ontario, and the cost of demolition of the Ontario plant?
Yeah, one of these is actually...
It's all added, it was all brought up here and then added
Correct.
to the cost of the equipment, is that right?
Correct.
This is the 2 point, maybe or something that you're asking to be not.
Yeah. And
So accounting, that's absolutely correct. You're supposed to, any cost incurred of moving or transporting or putting it into position to make it work are supposed to be capitalized. So now you're arguing that they shouldn't be part of the property tax value because it didn't enhance the value of the equipment, or?
Almost, but this cost doesn't even include the cost of delivery. It doesn't even include that cost.
Right, I understand. Right.
Yeah, but, you know, I mean, that's, if you look at page 2, that's one of the for property tax purposes, this is Assessor Handbook Bible 4, and it says, not all costs add value. For example, relocation costs are not costs contributing to the assessable value of a property. And that's basically what this is. It's basically the study that was done to make the move efficient and how to go about doing it. There's a series of permits that need to be pulled, all that detail that goes involved with the consolidation.
And just studying, like, again, it's like, you know, an integration of an existing plant to a new plant, that really, you know, adding value to the new plant and a dollar for dollar relationship.
Then why did they do it? Didn't add any value, why'd they do it?
The consulting, because in order to move, they require permits and all these other details, so they basically had to figure out the best way the most efficient way to actually consolidate these plants.
I understand, but that had value.
Well, it's not necessarily all. Sometimes you have to make a business expense. There's a value to the physical property, but there's also a value to the business component that isn't assessed as part of a property tax.
I see. Okay.
So you could, if you're looking at protecting your, business income flow, sometimes you will make an expenditure to protect that isn't necessarily an expenditure that you could recover from somebody else.
Okay.
Like if I said, I'm playing devil's advocate, but if I had asked the board, how much value to Tipton is the removal of Ontario, I would say not a whole lot, and I think that you would be the extreme, I think, on one side.
And the following pages, they were actually on the website for this consulting company, so that's where I put for the board as evidence. One part is the Ontario demo. How does the cost to demolish a building add value to Tipton? And then we have some photos that show the beginning phases of Ontario to the final left. If you read through page 8, it goes into detail as to this cost included. Basically, the demolition of Ontario, the design of the consolidation.
Got it.
And the additional pages are all the invoices from them. It's basically, it's not really tangible property tied to these costs. It's a lot of design, consulting for Ontario closure, consulting for the sale of equipment, trying to liquidate the Ontario facility. And you'll see the remaining from 20 onward, it's all the invoices.
Bottom line is you want $2-some-odd million off the assessment. Is that what
Right.
you're talking about?
For the 4 years.
Why didn't we say that up front? Just say we want this and this is why and give us the basics. Now we're here for
Starting at the top of the pyramid.
I was trying to be so the remaining pages, it's basically a monthly proceeded.
Okay.
So you'll see it on a monthly basis. They were billing them for their services for the course of the month. Now if we go to number 7, this would be the functional obsolescence. So just to get to your figures right away, it would actually be page 156, 157, and 158 are the value request reductions. So for 2009, the value requested adjustment is $2.3 million. The cost remains the same for all 3 years, which would be 9, 10, and 11. And basically, this cost represents the cost to cure the inefficiency in the plant related to the extractors and the sizers we mentioned. Prior exhibits, we talked about how the replacement of the extractors led to a bottleneck in the operation. So it required them placing the sizers. That's the cost to the sizers. If you look at page 156, it's 2 line items, and it's basically sizer north and south were both replaced, and they replaced equipment that was 5 years old because the varying levels of technology created too much of an bottleneck. They were running, I believe, at 45 tons an hour, where the extractors were running at 95. By putting in these sizers, they were similar technology, so they were running at 95 tons an hour. So the reductions are $2.4 million roughly for 9, 10, and 11. Also, if the board can turn to page
kind of the theory behind the bottleneck portion is that if you have a bottleneck in a production line, then that's impacting the value of the line because it doesn't have the capability to operate at the level it should have. And usually when you make that first expenditure, you're buying 85 tons production capability. But if you're only operating at 40 because there's a problem within the line itself, then you almost have to give a penalty to the end utility of the property. We know that the cost to cure that particular penalty was to remove the sizers and replace it at a cost of about $2.5 million to increase the production of the line. But in doing so, we know that the replacement of the 2.2, we replaced equipment that was only, was it 5 years old?
Correct.
Okay.
And if you turn to page 150 for the board,
In Exhibit 8?
in the current exhibit, yeah. Page
We're in 7?
Yeah, 7.
7.
The current one. If you look at page 150, there's also a flag on that page towards the end. This is correspondence with the taxpayer, and basically what we're trying to show the board is because of the limited output of the bottleneck, Sunkist actually had to outsource some of their oranges to another extractor because they couldn't process the volume. And as you guys probably are aware, with the orange industry, they have long-term contracts. They're required to extract these oranges. So by curing the problem, it eliminates the functional, but because their responsibility through the contractual obligations, they're still required to extract that juice. So they had to absorb the cost to outsource it because of the bottlenecks in the operation. So that's basically what this email sums up for the board. It also shows, the output totals. And this was actually prepared by the plant manager for us during the initial investigation of all these issues. So, you read through it, I would say the one important part is the ton rate per hour during the hybrid period ranged from 40 to 60 tons per hour. Since the steady state project, we're now realizing 85 plus tons an hour, that was with those two sizers of the $2.3 million cost to cure we're talking about, corrected. So, it doubled the output by spending the $2.3 million.
Okay.
So before the correction, the theory is before the correction occurred, like if you were a buyer, you wouldn't go buy the full utility until the correction was made.
I understand.
So, there has to be a penalty against the...
I got one other question regarding this and all this other information. Any of this been prepared by an independent third party? It's all in-house documents.
The following exhibit with the economic obsolescence, that's a separate government report that we didn't prepare. We're just utilizing it. But everything else is internal. Okay.
Okay.
And just for the board, everything else in this exhibit is basically the sizers to show you. In addition, there's some analysis here that talks about the decision to change the extractors and the effects with related to the sizers. So it's all the justification and the explanation by the taxpayer. But every one of these figures has a detail for the board if you guys wish to go through and read. Then, now we're in Exhibit 8. This is the economic obsolescence calculation, basically related to external factors to the plant. The citrus industry, from up until 2006, experiencing a lot of competition from foreign imports. Brazil being the main country. Brazil holds the largest citrus crops in the world, and they export most of it. They don't consume any of it. So what we did is did an economic obsolescence adjustment or operating penalty. We relied on the inutility formula, which is appraisal theory on how to establish the loss due to the competition that Sunkist, for example, had no control over. If you turn to page... So if you turn to page 12, this is actually probably what you've been asking me for, is a summary of all the issues for the board. Since this is our last value reduction, I've summarized every issue for the board to review. So here we have a 2007 economic obsolescence penalty. The calculation, I'm not sure if the board's familiar with it, but it's an inutility. Basically, you measure the rated output against the actual output to establish an operating penalty. Or the loss in value.
It's kind of like a vacancy rate.
Exactly. Very similar to like a vacancy rate in an apartment. So based on the math and the calculation, we established an 18% economic obsolescence adjustment for the lien date 2007. The formula basically flows, the output. I did note that the rated capacity we use an 85%. Basically, we accounted for 15%, which would be downtime for repair, routine maintenance, and so forth. But it's an 18% adjustment. If you look on page 12, we account for the obsolescence, then we have the ghost asset issue and the total reduction. It shows the assessor value to our applicant opinion of value and the requested reduction for 2007. Again, 2007, we weren't asking for functional. It's basically the ghost assets and the economic obsolescence. If you turn the page to 2008, and 2007, which we'll show in the next exhibit, it was a bad year for the citrus industry. They had some hurricanes that affected the crop. They had some disease and so forth. So that's why the output that year was drastically down compared to, for example, in 2008, penalties 2%. I mean, they were operating at a much more, they weren't impacted as bad in 2008. But, you know, I mean, here we have a summary of the issues for the board. You know, if you look at the bottom part, the obsolescence at 2%, we just put it through, it's 168,000.
What page was that?
Page 13. And if you account for the consulting fee, that's 285,000. Then the ghost assets, you know what I mean? So this is a line item of every reduction we've testified to.
So let me just ask a quick question then. So on this form, the application for a reassessment for 2007 year, we're not to look at this.
No.
These numbers are incorrect.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, because you show an adjustment for land and improvements, and you're showing improvements in structures and personal property of roughly 3.7 million, but you're actually saying it's 4,077,019 for 2007, correct?
Correct.
So disregard these numbers then.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And for 2008, I mean, on page 13, we summarize the issues for the board again, kind of summarizing all the issues we've testified to this morning. So our applicant opinion of value after accounting for the economic is $7.2 million. And you'll see in bold various issues we've testified to for the board. And the requested reduction, you know, rounded up is about $3 million for 2008. In 2009, again, following the same methodology, we applied the calculation. We come out with a 7% obsolescence adjustment for economic. Factor in the cost to cure issue we testified to, the ghost asset issue, and the consulting fee issue. Our total reduction is $5.5 million that we're requesting, and the opinion of value is about 15%.
Okay.
2010, same methodology. Numbers work out to about 16% obsolescence, carrying over the issues testified to. Requested reduction is $9.6 million. And 2011, same methodology, 16% economic obsolescence. Accounting for the various issues testified to, our requested reduction is about $7 million. Now, on page 17, here, what I did is, this document is an international, Trade Commission did the study because people in the orange industry were petitioning the government to get involved because these imports are driving down the price of their product. So this is the government report. This page 17, I basically highlighted all the key parts that would affect quantified economic obsolescence. So it's basically a summary of the report. All these bullet points are important. I've highlighted the bottom part. You know, I did include one assessor handbook assessment manual, which is the top part. You know, the presumptions the assessor's done their job correctly, but it also indicates that all government agencies, it's presumed, have done their job correctly, and this is a government report. That's our source documentation by the obsolescence. That's why.
Okay.
And you know what I mean? It mentions, you know, orange juice processors face significant year-to-year fluctuations in supply of round oranges. They result from bad weather, freezes, hurricanes, drought, citrus disease. All these things that they don't have control of. And in addition to that, they were being impacted by foreign competition. So that's what this report summarizes. All the capacity information and utilization is obtained from this report.
May I ask a clarifying question? Page 17, who prepared that?
I prepared that.
So this is your report?
No, this is coming from the following pages, this page 20.
But you typed out and
Yeah,
prepared?
I put that together.
Okay.
And every one of these tabs that's included is for the source documentation. I try to make it one sheet so that way we don't have to go page by page, but I guess the most important part in all this, when we get the figures for the calculation, would be page 59 through 61. That's basically a summary of the years of consumption and.
Let him find it.
So for example, on page 2000, I highlighted the top part. That shows consumption from 2000 to 2010. I mean, this report, it summarizes the decline. I mean, they also mentioned, the whole low-carb diet craze that occurred. That also impacted consumption of orange juice. It also talks about that domestic consumption is also down because of the alternatives. There's much more than just orange juice out there. But then it also adds in with, the weather conditions, drought, disease, and so forth, and then the Brazilian imports. Page 60, this is where we got the figures for the economic obsolescence calculation, which is capacity, utilization, and actual. And I mean, it has a history from 2000 all the way to 2010. And as you can see in the most recent years, in 2010, their utilization's down. The amount that's being processed is much lower than what it was in 2000. And that's kind of what impacts the calculations. That would summarize this report. I would emphasize the summary sheet is a good way, and then you can back it all in, find it on the report with the various tabs I've included.
And then Exhibit 9.
Yeah. So Exhibit 9 is just kind of summarizing a lot of the points for the board.
Rules of evidence.
Excuse me?
On page 1, you have rules of evidence.
Yes. And this is page 9 is a summary. The last page is a summary of the value conclusions, everything all over again.
This come from State Board of Equalization?
Yeah, this is the assessment appeals manual. Kind of just talks about the burden of proof, decision, the presumption the assessor's done their job correctly.
Okay. We can glean through that.
Yeah.
And I would say probably the last page 22 on for the board. I basically did this PowerPoint presentation for the board to try to summarize all the various issues and all the key points.
What page is that?
Page 22 on.
Why didn't you just submit that?
I thought it would be.
Why going through all this?
I thought it would be a good way to tie it all together.
We could have summarized this whole thing in about 10 minutes, done the whole thing, and we could have been on.
The detail is important. I grant you that. But in effect, we're just trying to find out what we're looking at. What's this case about? And basically, that's where we started, asking you to kind of give us an idea of what this case is about. And you've done a good job of giving us the preliminaries. The detail is something we can read at night. Go back and drill down.
I think that I was talking to Gilbert, before, and it's probably the way that we go about, discovering the issues is usually, we're going into the detail and going, well, it looks like they've got a lot of things that are capitalized here that probably aren't here any longer. We see items that, with reasons for the capitalization, well, is that really adding value? So we drill down first and then come up to the issues where probably for the board, we should start with the issues and drill down to the detail. But it's like tomato and tomato a little bit. Apologize for that.
Okay, basically, is this your presentation?
We have an Exhibit 10 that you haven't discussed yet.
Oh, I didn't see that.
10
through 16.
I don't have that.
I think that might have gone in accident. That might have been.
We bypassed that.
Okay,
I apologize.
it actually is labeled rebuttal exhibit.
Oh, okay.
So I don't think you meant to distribute that yet. Okay.
So at this stage, for time, I'm going to push this through the lunch hour because I think we need to get to the bottom of what the actual issues are.
Well, maybe we need to ask how long are they done? How long the assessor thinks they're going to be?
I'll try to be quick, maybe 15 minutes max.
Okay, is that your presentation in front of you?
It's a lot bigger than it. I mean, it's not as big as it looks. The audit results are in there, which you don't need to look at all this.
Okay.
There's just a few pages.
Then we're going to go through. Is there anything else you want to add to your presentation?
I would just for the board.
You'll have a chance to summarize later.
We've already entered this exhibit, which is 9, and I would tell the board, You guys can go through and read it. I think the one that seems to be a recurring issue we kept talking about early on in the presentation was the whole accounting versus appraisal. In page 31, I did a whole presentation on that for you guys, and it kind of just shows, you know, the systematic accumulation of cost leads to situations like this. So I kind of just wanted to show that. I know that's something we kind of go back and forth on, but it's a good summary for the board, especially if it's not something that's commonly heard at the appeals board. It can kind of show the board some clarification on that.
Well, this is intriguing enough where I'm going to go through it detail page by page and read it.
Enjoy it.
And that would probably be what I would kind of just have is probably the most important for you guys. And then it does summarize a lot of this. I apologize. It's a lot, but summary sheet.
Are you having trouble sleeping at night?
No. Well, actually, I do.
There's your
I
solution.
do wake up and then go to sleep. So at this stage, we'll have the assessor make their presentation. And I'm hoping, and if something's going to occur that's going to drag this on, to get this wrapped up by 1 o'clock. Okay? Now, if it goes longer than that, then we'll take a lunch break and come back and continue this afternoon. On the other side of the coin, if we can get this presented and submitted to us by 1, I would appreciate it.
I have an airplane to catch at 4 o'clock,
So we got to be done by 3:30. Okay.
All right, I'll talk fast. Okay, we know the subject property, it's down in Tipton. One thing I wanted to point out is that there's, the audit roll corrections are done under an unsecured assessment number because of the transfer of ownership in 2012. The audit was completed in 2010 or 2012 for the 2007 through 10 years, and so we had to make the bills, you know, separate than on the secured rolls. So we do have a couple of assessment numbers we're working with, so that's just something I wanted to bring up because of the usualness of it. The property's a juice processing facility. The major equipment includes extraction equipment, boilers, tanks, packaging equipment, and piping. The business began in '81 at that location, and equipment and fixtures have been added ever since. We use the cost approach, which the assessor is required by law to assess property at full cash value. The equipment index factors are developed annually by the state board, and the applicant pointed out that there's not maybe the recognition of market value, but each year they do recognize market value. That's what the index factors are. They're trying to find out what the replacement cost new of that equipment is, and then there's depreciation added onto that for the life of the, of the equipment. And it is found to be a reliable approach to valuing equipment. Sunkist had an audit completed in May of 2012 that included the 2007 through 2010 lien dates, which are under appeal. Exhibit B shows the audit results. You do not have to read all of those or anything. There's 100 pages of that. But if you turn to page 10, that basically is the summary page of the audit results. So as you can see, the highlighted numbers halfway down the page are the values that are on the county roll currently for personal property and fixtures only. Due to a joint venture and change on the property deed to Ventura Coastal LLC, the corrections resulting from the 2007 to 10 dates are on that 800 number, or the unsecured that I mentioned earlier. Let's see. Originally, when I'd received the information, I was under the impression there were 3 issues of concern. So I might have to address economic obsolescence in addition, but I had down functional obsolescence, ghost assets, and the construction in progress, which I don't think the applicant brought up too much on the construction. So anyway, functional obsolescence, basically their reasoning is a change of extraction lines from Brown to JBT. Our response is the applicant states that the equipment in question was not functioning properly in 2009 and 10 due to the conversion of equipment from one brand to another. The equipment itself, prior to the conversion, performed the function for which it was intended. It might not have produced the same quantity as the newer equipment, but it was producing as intended for that equipment. and allowing for record-breaking revenues. Please see Exhibit C. So if you go to page 121, these are articles from Sunkist themselves. That was actually in March of 2012, but it's for the 2010-11 year, and the quote is, for the second consecutive year, Sunkist growers generated more than $1 billion in overall revenue. And if you go, let's see. You go to page 124. That article is dated February 25th of this year, but it states this marks the fourth consecutive billion-dollar year for Sunkist, which they're talking 2009 through 2013 years. Profitable and competitive returns have fostered growth for Sunkist, allowing us to expand with the addition of a new grower, shipper, and acreage increases among Sunkist's existing packing houses. Then on page 127, 2006, which the applicant's claiming, 2006 and 7 were bad years, but yet 2006 was a record-breaking year for Sunkist. Total revenues reached an all-time high of $1.1 billion, and a complex naval season was brought to a remarkable conclusion. And these are their own quotes. Once the new equipment was combined with the old, neither the new nor the old equipment had output at its highest capacity due to allocation of resources. As the Assessor's Handbook, Section 504 states, functional obsolescence is the loss of value in a property caused by the design of the property itself. When the capacity of a property to perform the function for which it was intended declines, functional obsolescence exists. In this case, there was nothing wrong with the design or functionality of the equipment. The reduced capacity was caused by the transition from one extractor to the other. This was a management decision to change equipment from Brown to JBT extractors since the Brown contract was going to expire. The upgrade to newer or different equipment is common in all thriving industries and does not create a decline in value of the existing equipment. In the years 2010 through 13, the company had record-breaking profits, which we already pointed that out. Although there was a citrus freeze in 2007, the value of the equipment did not decrease, and the years prior to and subsequent to 2007 more than made up for any cyclical downturns. The applicant has mentioned that repairs and maintenance of equipment is a reason to reduce the lives of equipment, but the assessor disagrees. More often, equipment lives are sustained or extended by maintenance of the equipment. In addition, repairs that are capitalized are intended to extend the life or increase the utility of the equipment. If the cost was merely to maintain the equipment, it should have been expensed. The second issue is removal of ghost assets. The applicant's reasoning is after the audit in 2012, which I know this is a little contradictory because you said there was a physical inventory in 2010, but from my notes, it stated that after the audit, there was a physical inventory of all equipment located at the Sunkist facility. The plant, and then their other reason is that the plant maintained the same layout and it would require removal of existing equipment before new additions could be added. Our response is that since the assets were included on the applicant's books and records as owned and controlled at each lien date, the assessor requested disposal receipts to override the non-removal from the books and records. When we do an audit, we have to base the audit on evidence that we received. The applicant provided the books and records as evidence of what they had. So to override that evidence that they gave us, we need something else. The applicant failed to provide any documentation that would confirm the assets had been removed or disposed prior to each lien date. Even if equipment is not in use, it's still assessable at full value. Therefore, per the case of May Department Stores Company versus, I'm going to take a breath, County of Los Angeles, the taxing authority is not required to accept a valuation formula. It has no way of verifying. Because the assessor could not conduct a physical survey of the stores in question after the fact, the assessor was justified in refusing to apply the abandoned property formula in those years. In Exhibit D, real quickly, is the May Company case. And basically, it was appealed, and the appellate court as well as the original court both decided that the assessor does not have to go back and make changes. You know, it's one thing to go forward with the changes which have been allowed in this case for the 2011 year, but to go back to other years and say that that equipment was not there is not required by law. And since they're not objecting to the construction in progress, then we can just skip section 3. So the assessor's opinion of value is the amount enrolled.
And for the record, Exhibit A contains the roll values and the breakdown of those values for each date appealed.
So that's the current values on the roll that you're defending after the escapes.
Those are the details.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Now going back to the board, any questions of the assessor's presentation? None? Any questions of the applicant's presentation?
Are they going to they have their rebuttal?
We're going to go into a rebuttal. Basically, do you have any issues with what the assessor presented?
I mean, the main issue is it's kind of conclusory argument, and that there wasn't really any.
You could speak into.
I'm sorry. The main issue I have really is that it's kind of a conclusionary argument. There's a lot of there's discussion, but there's no substantiation of facts. Kind of working backwards, like with May department stores. You have May department stores, okay. In the factual determination of the hearing that was found by the board, the court went back and said, you know, what you guys did was okay. Your finding was okay. We know that repairs and rebuilds and maintenance costs don't add value to the subject property, and that wasn't done by the assessor. We also know that, for example, you know, if the assessor were to go out and look at our equipment and they saw a lot of equipment that wasn't on the books and records, they would pick it up, even if we didn't have receipts for it. In other words, we'd get an audit escape because the assessor is charged with valuing the property at fair market value and valuing all the property that's there, not what's reflected as being there on the books and records. So, you know, the assessor is asking for receipts of disposals. Well, how often do you keep receipts of disposals? I don't think that that's really a fair question to ask the taxpayer, because it isn't really how people operate. It really does come down to, if you look into the detail of what we do know, which I would almost call a receipt of disposal, we have in the detail that you can go through, that you said you might want to go through tonight when you're sleeping or when you want to go to sleep, that there's been removals all along. And that's not really reflected on what was reported. And the way that we tried to remedy that is we asked the people that know, who is the plant personnel, who is very familiar with both the purchasing of the new equipment and the disposal of old equipment and the change out and the operations, to go through the listing and identify what they thought was missing. And so, you know, that's the approach that we took. We thought it was reasonable, and we think it meets an evidentiary standard that the board could hang its hat on.
And this wasn't provided to the assessor's office?
Yes, it was.
It was.
Okay.
What was provided?
Well, let them finish, and then I'll go back to the assessor's rebuttal.
Yeah, no problem. With the, you know, say we went and we were looking at the revenue of, you know, a very large accountancy firm that was located throughout the country, and then we were to say, well, hey, this accountancy firm does record revenues in this year. They've done, you know, $1.1 billion in revenue. There's a long way between that $1.1 billion in revenue and what the fair market value of the computer systems or the leasehold improvements in a leased building, or, you know, their copiers, or their, you know, whatever, you know, CPAs are going to use. And so just to generally use the argument that, hey, we were in productive revenues, therefore there is no decline or additional decline in some physical assets in one plant in Tulare County, I'm not sure really how you get there on that. If we're showing over and over again, and the detail will show it. And part of the problem is that we'd probably have to sit here all day, because we spent weeks literally going through the detail and interviewing the people at the plant. We tried to summarize it as well as possible, but if we sat here and went through the detail, you would see over and over again that they were capitalizing repair costs and maintenance costs, and they were moving things and changing things where it's difficult to go back to the original cost component that was changed and then removed. And all we tried to do was just say, hey, there's a couple of big issues here that's easy to see, the things that were removed, that were identified, and also the one large line item that was a huge bottleneck in the process that cost us $2.2 million to correct.
Right. In regards to the overall operation of Sunkist, how many juice plants do they have?
To be honest with you.
Well, they
Is
have
there more than one?
But there's more.
But in their overall operations, they have Sunkist. I mean, they're putting
In
on the
effect,
shelf.
the marketing of whole oranges.
Right,
Yes.
and then they operate under numerous
That's my
names.
next question, is what percentage is the juice to fresh? Is it 70% juice, 70% fresh?
No, it's more like about 10%.
Well, here, let the,
I don't know personally.
I think that most of it's the the frozen from concentrate, because typically they sell it and then other people can bottle it under their name.
no, I understand that. But as far as what Sunkist does,
I wouldn't know that offhand.
yeah, you don't know the breakdown.
But I know that was one thing I would emphasize on the 1 billion remarks from the assessor, is that
Right.
it's a big company. You don't know how much revenue.
They could be making or losing money, and the juice plants could be running full steam ahead.
And then there's multiple sources of income coming in, or revenue tied to
Right,
it.
or vice versa.
And if I can add to what Mr. Gangoff is talking about, I'll add my piece on the functional obsolescence. The assessor's summary is partially accurate, but there's a twofold step because it also relates to the sizers. They did make the decision to transition from brown extractors to JBT, but the issue was that the sizers weren't compatible with the new technology. That's what created the bottleneck, excuse me. So the 2.3 million Ron mentioned is the cost to fix that. It wasn't strictly management decided. I would also add that the assessor mentions that the applicant was asking for a life change. We weren't asking for a life change. I'd clarify that. I'd made a comment earlier in the presentation where the assessor is bound by guidelines that they have to put it on a 15-year life. And I've been doing this long enough to know that you can't get a life change. It's a very difficult task. You can't really do it unless it comes from the State Board of Equalization or the California Assessors Association.
But if you abandon the equipment, sell it off 5 years.
Correct. And that's what we would clarify, is the disposal, or, and then also on the ghost assets, we don't have, which the assessor did request, I will, go on record to say, they did ask for disposal records. Unfortunately, the scenario that plays out typically in the real world with, a plant being tipped in the accounting records being in Sherman Oaks, the communication is not always the greatest. The best way I thought we can try to flush that out is in showing the capital appropriation requests. In the one that I did read in, it talks about how they demolished the existing equipment. Or they removed the existing equipment. And if you look at the other exhibit, which is the ghost assets, you can go through and identify multiple sizers on the books. But we know physically there's 3 sizers, 2 that run oranges and 1 that runs lemons. And the lemon wasn't put in until the consolidation in 2008 or so. In addition to that, I think that would summarize mine.
The only other item that, just working backwards, is that the assessor makes reference to the index factors and the percent good factors, which basically is a cost approach. I mean, the tables that are provided from the county falls into the category of cost approach, and there is no magic bullet of a cost approach of a table that can be issued to all industry groups across the board, and in all fact situations, it's gonna yield the correct fair market value. So I think that you really do have to use judgment, one, but you have to make an investigation into the individual components of the assessment to make a broad, appeal to what the value is.
Mr. Fowler, you have additional questions of the rebuttal? Okay. At this stage of the game, we'll let the assessor have a crack at rebutting what you just said.
First of all, the issue about the 1.1 billion or $1 billion revenues. Two of the issues that came up were functional and economic obsolescence. Usually there's some kind of indication, either a loss of capacity or a loss of income or something that's showing that the company is affected by either functional or economic obsolescence. So the fact that they're having record-breaking profits or record-breaking revenues, I should say, would more indicate that they're gaining momentum rather than declining. And as far as the removal of assets, you know, it's one thing if you dispose of a computer or something small, but when you have $2.5 million of assets removed, usually there's some kind of verification of that. There's other assets that have been removed off the books and records, and so they do have some type of review, apparently, of what's on the books and records. And as far as demo costs being assessed, I don't see those throughout the audit results. Possibly, there's a lot of line item assets. I don't see anything that indicates that there are demolition costs or anything being assessed. We wouldn't assess those if they were at another plant, especially. Under that construction in progress section, actually on page 4, there is some issues, I guess, that would relate to the repairs and replacements and things like that they did address. So even though it's not pertaining maybe to the construction, but it might still pertain to some of the other areas that have been addressed. And that's it.
Okay. We're going to go to ask you for a summary, and then we're going to have the assessor do a summary, and then we're going to come back to the board and see what we want to do. So go ahead and summarize your position.
Okay, if we share, Gilbert will start.
Absolutely.
And I'll just add anything at the end. Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you for the time this morning. Christy knows, and we've been working on this project for numerous years, so I'm glad to get closure on it this morning. I would emphasize that, this morning we testified to numerous issues. We relied on the information best available. We took a lot of time reviewing all these capital appropriation requests and information that would lead us in the direction to try to arrive at the right value. Establishing an opinion of value on a property is a very difficult task. We try to apply appraisal theory as prescribed in the guidelines, assessor handbook. Everything that presented to us, we tried the best we could to quantify and address these issues. The ghost asset issue, like I mentioned previously, in a perfect world, we would have somebody at the plant maintaining this. If something comes in, get somebody to come and haul it out or, toss it. But unfortunately, the record keeping is not the greatest. I did work with 3 different individuals at the assessor's office, and I always extended an invitation to come towards the facility and meet with the people that I'm getting my information from. Those are the people that every day in, day out, dedicate their time to the operation of the day-to-day operations of the plant, and they're most knowledgeable. All I can do is relay the information that's given to me and present it as it's presented to me. The assessor never, went out there to take the tour. Who knows if had they done so, maybe we could have addressed that issue. On the functional and economic sides, we presented information we feel supports our opinion of value, the cost to cure, and the economic obsolescence. The assessor references the $1 billion in revenues. It's very difficult to extract how much of that revenue comes from these old plants. If these old plants generated so much of the revenue, Sunkist wouldn't have closed the Ontario plant. The Ontario plant was closed during some of these record-breaking profits of the company. And if it was contributing to the revenue, they wouldn't have done that. So it's very difficult to extract the revenue-generating ability of some of these smaller to such a big brand that Sunkist is. And the last thing I would actually address too is on the ghost assets. The assessment manual we presented shows all the different information or the evidence we could submit to. Anything that shows or points us in the right direction. And we feel through the capital appropriation request and the language included that accounts for the demolishing existing equipment and removing. That's as best as we can do with the limited information, especially dating to some of this cost. And keep in mind that this cost goes all the way back to 1946. So, you know what I mean? Unfortunately, we don't have the right documents the assessor wants, but we made a judgment call based on the information we did have. And I'll let Ron finish off the.
Okay.
Just one second. I won't go into this in too great a detail, but in our tab 9 and our page 17, there's discussion about the weight of the evidence. You know, the outcome of the hearing is supposed to be based on the preponderance of the hearing evidence presented at this hearing. The preponderance is just a more likely standard. You know, you have the 3 standards of review: preponderance of the evidence, clear and convincing, and beyond a reasonable doubt. And you can almost look at a preponderance of the evidence standard as a 50 to 51% standard. On page 17, it references that the presumption that the assessor has properly performed his or her duties is not evidence and will not be considered by the board in its deliberations. Okay, the fact that the tables came from the State Board of Equalization is not evidence. I mean, it is evidence if it's presented in that way, but it's not evidence to just say that, hey, we can throw out a number because the state gave us the table and it's absolutely true and no adjustments need to be made to it. That goes for personal property the same as it goes for real property. You know, in the real property, if you have comparable sales and adjustments need to be made, you make the adjustments. If you have a discussion of income or a difference in income or expenses, you make the adjustments for it. It's the same thing in the cost approach. The assessor's presumption is not evidence. They didn't really present evidence of their opinion of value. They just said a few kind of conclusory remarks of why they think we're wrong. But I don't think that it's enough, really, like if you're making that preponderance of the evidence calculation between the evidence that we presented and what the assessor actually presented against it, I don't think it can carry. So, you know, with that, we understand that the board may not, appreciate every, single thing that we've done in our case, or, they might feel that it's weak here or strong here, but we did present something, and there's obviously time involved in what we did. So with that, we'll leave it with the board. And
thank you very much. And summary from the assessor.
Thank you. Julia Langley, Deputy County Counsel. I'm going to turn this over to Christy in a minute. I just have to take issue with Council's comments to your board. They are absolutely not accurate. Ms. Lee has attached a short report with 5 exhibits that support and substantiate the assessor's opinion of value. She didn't think it necessary to educate your board on fundamentals of establishing valuation in taxation, but we've certainly submitted enough to establish that the assessor's opinion of value is accurate, and also that in the world of valuation and taxation, it is extremely unrealistic and strains credulity that we would go down to individual plants and talk to John Doe about what they did with their scrap metal or their equipment. That's why there are taxation rules and published cases and specifics dealing with ghost assets, and you've got to have documentation. You just can't come in years later and say, well, we got rid of it. We're a big company. We're not mom and pop, but we have no documentation. That's really difficult to believe, especially in this type of industry. And I'll turn this over to Ms. Lee.
may I respond to that quickly? Just
quickly.
But very quickly. The lack of resources is not an excuse. The county is collecting tax based on a value that they've established. Taxpayer hasn't established the value. The taxpayer is not collecting tax. We're paying tax. If you have to do work and you have to get down to the detail to determine a fair market value of the property you're appraising, you do it. I understand that it's a difficult job, and the courts even understand it's a difficult job, but they never change the standard away from fair market value. And to do that appraisal requires investigation. It's good enough if the taxpayer doesn't come in and protest it. It's good enough to place a value when you have to do values of tens of thousands of taxpayers, hundreds of thousands throughout the state, to start off with that premise. But when you get down to the appeal process and the taxpayer says, hey, there's additional adjustments that need to be made in there, look at them, you have to do it.
Go ahead.
Okay, in summary, the auditor that conducted the audit went out to the plant and did tour the plant and looked at assets at the plant. I did not find it necessary to go in 2014 to a plant that we're reviewing for 2007 through 2011, because what I'm going to see there today isn't going to be the same thing that was there on these dates that are in question. As far as the years of the assets, I don't see anything that we're assessing prior to 1953, which is old, but $25,000 in cost, which has been significantly depreciated. And then in summary, I just do not see that the applicant has provided sufficient evidence to warrant a reduction in value. Thank you.
Now I'll bring it back to the board. What do we want to do? We want to, quite honestly, this is a lot of detail. We need to take it under advisement. Any objection to that? Okay. Then we're going to go ahead and consider this in closed session, and we should be able to get you an answer within 60 days. Okay.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Okay, we have, I believe, a stipulation on the next agenda item. PNC Stores. Can you give us a brief summary as to what this stipulation is about?
Yes, Assessi PNS Stores, Inc., mailing address 300 Philippi Road, Columbus, Ohio. The company reported and was assessed for tenant improvements under fixed improvements that were included as part of the real property structural assessment. Now that sounds a little confusing. So that we basically double assessed them. They had reported things as fixtures, but we'd already assessed them as structure. Consequently, the stipulation is reducing the fixed improvement value by $357,510 for the 2012 lien date. Would you like me to read in the
Stipulation?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Application number 2012-00299, assessment number 800-254-261-000, fixed improvements, $39,440, personal property, $228,140, for a net taxable value of $267,580.
Okay. We have a stipulation. Any questions by the board? Then do I hear a motion to accept the stipulation as read by the assessor?
On application number 2012-00299, APN number 800-254-261-000 by PNC Stores, I move that we accept this stipulation as presented by the assessor.
You have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Stipulation is accepted. Okay, what is going on with agenda item number 10, Ross Dress for Less? Any information that you can give us there?
They have, I've been in contact with them. They provided some information. Unfortunately, it was nothing to make a stipulation, not enough to base a stipulation on. What they provided basically proved that the assessment was correct. And they sent in some more invoices 2 days ago, or 2 business days ago. I was on vacation and requested to not attend the hearing.
Oh, so in other words, it wasn't a request for postponement. They're just saying that they're not going to show up.
They're not going to show up.
So then we're going to deny this for non-appearance. Okay. Let's go ahead, and because it's the last item that we're going to consider.
Well, we haven't done the withdrawal, so we still need to do that.
Yeah, so
You want me to do that one?
yeah, let's go ahead and just do this one and get it out of the way.
I move that agenda item number 10, Ross Dress for Less, Inc., be denied for non-appearance.
Have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Now, what are we going to do with James Jensen, Tazaria?
We
Why
should
is that on here?
probably
Let's-
leave.
Wait a minute, we gotta do number 11.
Wait,
Yeah.
let's
We're-
do the withdrawals.
Okay.
Okay, because then we're going to leave before you go into closed session.
Well, that's not, is that in closed session?
Yeah,
Oh, I'm
that's
sorry.
deliberations.
Yeah,
on-
I'm sorry.
on the one
Then
that
let's
we
go ahead and do
listed.
the withdrawals. We have a withdrawal list.
We also have number 4, number 6, and I think we should go ahead and do number 7, even though they withdrew on the record.
Okay.
And you can do all of those plus 11 in one motion.
Okay, where is my withdrawal list here? Okay, do I hear a motion regarding those withdrawals and the withdrawal list?
I move that we accept agenda items number 4, 6, and 7, as well as the withdrawal calendar as withdrawn.
You have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, hearing none, motion carries.
Okay.
So that takes care of withdrawals.
And I think we may have some discussion on number 12, so I'd like to go to lunch first.
Okay, why don't we do that?
Okay.
We'll go ahead and break for hour, half hour? What do you want?
Whatever suits the board.
What's that?
How long do we want to break for lunch?
Oh, I've got an airplane to catch, so I've got to,
Let's break for a half hour if
That'd
we
be fine.
can. And then we'll come back at roughly 1 o'clock and we'll be out of here by 1:30. Is that going to be okay?
that'll be fine.
Okay.
Well, we'll see what we can get to in that amount.
Okay.
Candace, if you need to send in what you're.
Now, see, how do we want to set this up? In that case, we want to, how do we want to set this? We're back on the record. Okay.
Business as Tazaria Coffee and Tea.
In the case of James Hudson, DBA Tanzania Coffee and Tea, application number 2012-00202. We want to, a continuance on this, or?
Well, what we're saying today is that we weren't really reaching a final decision in June. We should have announced that it was a tentative decision in favor of the applicant, and then our office came back with draft findings today. And so what you're doing today is reaffirming the tentative decision in favor
We're
of the
reaffirming
applicant.
a tentative resolution in favor of the taxpayer.
And directing that staff send out the preliminary findings to the parties.
Directing the staff to send out the preliminary findings to the applicant.
Both parties, and then they can try and figure out
Figure out, okay.
Okay.
That's fine.
to come back to you. And it says September, I believe.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. All right,
So that's your motion?
that's my motion.
I second it. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. And hearing no opposed, motion carries.
And just for the record, we'll note that Mr. Morris is on the dais, but he had recused himself from considering this matter, so he did not participate in that motion.
Two of us. Regarding two other issues that we continued from today, regarding Apple 8 hospitality owners, agenda item number 5, and agenda item number 8 and 7, Sunkist Growers, Inc.
Not number 7. Sorry,
But not number 7.
That's
7
the
was
one they
withdrawn.
withdrew.
Yeah, number 8. We are continuing our deliberations on those two items, and we'll take them up in our next closed session. Okay? Hearing
So
no
no
other...
action on those today.
Yeah. No other business in the Assessment Appeals Board for July 21st, 2014. The session is now closed.